Today on the podcast, we're diving into the mind of Doug Allan.
Capturing animal behaviour in this extreme and sometimes hostile place takes a very special kind of wildlife cameraman. And for me, they don't come much more special than Doug Allan.
Doug Allan is a world-renowned photographer and videographer, and he's actually worked alongside Sir David Attenborough on the likes of Frozen Planet or Blue Planet. In this conversation, we cover all about nature, about wildlife, about photography, about videography, but more importantly, about global warming and its devastating effects on wildlife. This is the Into the Mind podcast, and my name is Harrison Brown. If you're watching or listening, I hope this helps. I've been so excited for this, Doug, because for years, I remember growing up and I was always obsessed with wildlife photography, videography, and since then I've actually become a videographer and photographer. So I'm super excited to chat to you. So I know that you kind of began with a degree in marine biology. Do you think you always had kind of like a passion for nature and the outdoors and wildlife?
No, I didn't. I wasn't one of these wee boys that, saw the path ahead in any way clearly. But I do remember that seeing things underwater. In fact, I'll tell you where it came down to. We used to go for a wee picnic spot when I was about maybe 7 or 8 years old. We went to a wee picnic spot just up from Dunfermline. And it was by a river, and it was quite popular. And I went there one day, and there was a person in the water with a mask on and flippers or fins. And I'd never seen anything like that before, and he was swimming around. And when he came over, I obviously must have looked so interested in it. He came out of the water and then he said, "Do you want a wee look?" And he gave me the mask and just pushed it on my face and just said, "Bend over and look down." And I was no more than waist high in the water, but I bent down and I looked down and I could see these wee minnows round about my feet dancing around. And I just had no idea that with a mask on you could see so clearly into the water. So there was some moment of realisation at that point. And then, I think I grew up in an era where proper, what I'd call analogue adventures were being done. I clearly remember reading Jacques Cousteau's book, The Silent World, when I was about 10, and then reading about the Kon-Tiki expedition as well. And these were real, out into the unknown, so to speak. And so I took on more of the underwater thing. We were lucky enough to go as a family to the Mediterranean to take advantage of some of the cheap package holidays that came out. Of course, the Med was great. Wow. It was warm, fins everywhere. So it took that like a duck to water, really. And that grew through the 60s, when I was in my teenagers. And it was a great decade for exploration. We were shooting into space like we'd never done before. And Cousteau was on the television, and I think the whole idea of adventurous sports, got a hold of me. And while I played competitive sports, there was always something about diving and being in the water that appealed to me. It was the fact that you didn't compete with the ocean. You went with it. You went with the flow. You went with the waves, and you got masses of experience so that you really felt at home in it. So when I finally got old enough to begin getting trained with an alcohol, proper cylinder in your back and things, when I was 17, it was really quite straightforward. And by then, an interest in marine biology, or an interest in the seas, really, because that's the other thing. We were talking about farming the sea and even people living underneath the sea. There were experiments going on where scientists flooded mouse lungs with super oxygenated water and watched these mice move around underwater, getting the oxygen they needed from the water in their lungs. And there was an idea that people would do that kind of thing. So it was just a great mix of things. And so I decided that I wanted to do biology because, frankly, it seemed the most interesting science, certainly, to do. It was all about who we were. But again, just by pure luck, biology was morphing into less of a study of individual animals and how they work, but into whole ecosystems, how the ocean works. And, when we went into space with our first rocket in '68 at Christmas, and went into deep space. In other words, it was the first one to leave and go round the moon 3 times and then come back. Those pictures that they took, the one in particular where you've got the moonscape down below and this blue cloudy planet in the distance, that was a phenomenally important picture to rouse people's interest and to really summarise what was a sort of nascent, just growing up conservation awareness. That really punched it home. And I was right at that stage where I was about to do a degree and all that kind of stuff. So I just thought marine biology is going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. And so it was. I really enjoyed, learning all about it. So really, when you ask me where it started, it didn't start so much with a love of the outdoors. It started with getting into what was a very foreign but exciting environment underneath the sea.
And would you say that photo of the kind of moonscape with the blue planet, if you want to call it that, in the background, would you say that was the inspiration to start going more into the photography, videography field?
No, I wasn't. Photography wasn't even on my radar at that point. First of all, taking photographs. Well, funnily enough, my father was a photojournalist, but the element of his job that appealed to me was its kind of, I'm going to sound like a hopeless romantic, but it was he seemed to do exciting things. I mean, he knew every policeman in Dunfermline. And when there was an emergency going on, some newsworthy story, he would often be the first to hear about it. And being a freelance, he would get out there, take pictures, then send them to the newspapers, etc. So it seemed to me that his life had lots of elements of unpredictability, excitement about it. And I think that appealed to me. I remember going down a pit with him. I remember going down the mines with him just to carry cameras and equipment with him. But we went down and went in one of those mines that went underneath the Forth. And it was way down there and the miners were working and all the rest of it. It was just superbly exciting. But I wasn't into photography. I didn't see that as a means to an end. In fact, when I go on further, it was really only when I left university and decided, well, the degree was great. I really enjoyed doing it, and I still have good friends from the lecturers who taught me. I decided as I did the degree that I didn't really want to be a scientist. I really valued knowing all about biology, knowing at biology at a level of a scientific degree, but I just felt that my place is not collecting the data and then crunching it, being a proper scientist. What I preferred to do was that, again, back in those days, not many marine biologists actually dived, because diving, the route to diving was much more complicated and onerous than it is now. There was no PADI. There was no flying out to the Red Sea for a week and learning to dive in those waters. It was the long British subaquicole method, etc. But on the other hand, if you learn to dive, I will say this today, if you learn to dive in Scotland and get 300 or 400 dives under your belt there, you can go anywhere. If you go to the Red Sea and do all your diving there, that's fine. That equips you for the Red Sea, but it doesn't equip you for cold water, poor visibility, lumpy seas, all that kind of stuff. And I was doing that kind of thing with the Fife Subaquicole while I was doing my degree. So basically what I wanted to do when I finished was I decided I didn't want to do any more academia, PhDs, what have you. I wanted to try to find jobs with biologists that involved diving, whereby I was more of support staff than the actual. Collecting the data for me was fun. Leave the crunching of it to other people. So that's what I did when I came out. I began to look for diving jobs. And actually the first job I had was I applied, I'd graduated, but I had turned my back on academia. I didn't really know what I was going to do next, apart from let's find a job diving. And I saw a little classified ad in the back of a dive magazine, which said, diver wanted for interesting work in Scottish rivers with a P.O. box number. So I wrote away to it. And Bill Abernethy got back in contact. Now, Bill Abernethy was Scotland's last full-time professional freshwater pearl fisherman. And Bill lived in a wee house in Cooperangus. And Bill and his father had done pearl fishing all their lives with the traditional method, which basically means wading around in water up to your waist or shallower with what you call a wading glass, which for all the world looks like a 2-pint mug with a glass bottom in it. And you bend over, you use that to break the surface, and then on the other hand, you've got a stick with a forked cleft on the end of it. And when you see a mussel on the bottom, particularly a mussel that has a certain twist in the shell, and you can see that even from the top, but get your stick down, twist it round about the mussel, lift up the mussel, put it in a sack on your back, and spend the day collecting those mussels, and then open them. And if you know what kind of shells to look for, and more importantly, you know which parts of various rivers to go to, then you can make a living out of it. And so what Bill knew was a lot of places where he knew there were good pearl beds, because back in those days, even today, I could take you to parts of Scottish rivers where there are lots of shells in the bottom, but there might be so few pearls within those shells that if you just took any of them, you could spend all day opening them and still find nothing. But Bill knew where the good areas of rivers were, and he taught me to look when you were swimming across a bed of shells, just to pick those 3 or 4 that were the most likely to have a pearl in them. And Bill knew lots of areas where the pearls were good, but the water just deepened off so that he could no longer wade, and he might have to move on to a more onerous, harder way of pearl fishing, which took a lot longer. And Bill thought, if I could get a diver down there amongst those same quality of shells, then he or she could work faster. So Bill advertised for diver, and I got the job. So for a year, we dived all over Scotland and Ireland in those special parts of rivers that Bill knew, getting enough pearls that we could sell them to jeweller and make a living out of it, which was great. It was pretty hard work, and I just got to see some of the nicest bits of Scotland. And then, but at the same time, I was writing around to see if I could, find a proper job with the biologists involved. And again, reading a dive magazine, I learned about this group of biologists who were working out in the Red Sea. So this is in 1974. The Red Sea is pretty, there's not the same diving operations. They were working out of the central Red Sea, out of Port Sudan. And they were studying a starfish called crown of thorns starfish, which in those days was causing a lot of concern out on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, because it was existing in plague numbers out there. But huge, hundreds of thousands of them were really making a real mess. They were eating a lot of coral over big areas in the Great Barrier Reef. And there was concern, was this some unnatural phenomenon? We're going to witness the disappearance of the reef. So anyway, the Cambridge group discovered a population of crown of thorns living in the Red Sea, but living in balance with the coral reef, not overeating it. So they got a grant and started a long-term study of the Acanthaster, or the crown of thorns, to see what it was doing, who was eating it, and its reproductive strategy. So there was an article written about someone who dived with them, and I wrote to the Cambridge group, and they said, well, we don't really got any funding, but if you can fly yourself out here, then certainly you can help us. So I sank some of my savings from the pearl fishing and went from the rivers of Scotland to the coral reefs of the Red Sea, which was pretty cool. And did that, worked with them for about 6 months, 7 months, had a good time. And then that project came to an end. I came back, did a little bit of diving with Bill, and then worked as a diving instructor running a dive school in Jersey. And it was when I was working in Jersey that same dive magazine had another article about a diver who had just come back from the Antarctic, working for the British Antarctic Survey. And I thought, that could be interesting. So, and I mean, it's hard to remember, you won't remember, what it was like before the internet and email. I mean, even to find out where is the British Antarctic Survey located, who do I write to, I sent write my letter, it just took a long time. Anyway, I contacted them and got an application form and filled it in, and actually got an interview. In the summer of 75, I got an interview for a possible diver in the Antarctic. However, 2 months later, a letter came to the dive school in Jersey saying that I was unsuccessful in my application But they basically thought I was overqualified because basically down there you would be working with graduate students, and assisting them. Basically, the diver was a support role. There were several marine programs on Sydney which needed diving to either set up their experiments or collect samples, what have you. And they thought I was a good diver, but I was a bit overqualified. Most of the divers didn't have degrees in marine biology. Anyway, they said, not this time. So I remember that letter arrived at the same day as another letter arrived from the Red Sea people saying, we've got another contract, can you come back out here and help us? So it was the end of the diving school season in Jersey, so I packed up there, went back to the Red Sea, and again helped with some research. And I was there, I remember, in January of 1976, when a telegram arrived. This is in the days before faxes or anything. A telegram arrived for me at the Cambridge Research Group place. And it basically said, we've got an unexpected vacancy in the Antarctic, would you like to go? And I remember showing this to one of the scientists I was friendly with. And he said, look, you've got to go. Man, the chance of going to the Antarctic is fantastic. And that was more or less what I thought anyway. So I telexed them back and I said, yes, I can go. So I remember coming back from the Red Sea and then being about 2 weeks in UK and then flying out to the Antarctic and landing at the bottom of South America on the ship across to the Antarctic onto the base I was going to be working at. The ship arrived in the afternoon, it left the following morning, and we didn't see another ship for 9 months because I got in right at the end of the summer.
Wow.
Because I was an emergency replacement. So I got parachuted into it with very little idea really about what I was going to say letting myself into. But normally, when you go to the Antarctic, if I had been successful at that interview, I would have left the Jersey Dive School, gone, spent a month, 2 months in Cambridge, meeting other people who had been to the Antarctic, learning all about what the job involved, and then go down on the ship with all of them, see a bit of the Antarctic, finally end up on the base. I missed all of that. I just went straight from the Red Sea to the Antarctic. But I got to say the guys on base were great, and the diving itself was... The only thing that was in any way unfamiliar was really just the cold. But even when you arrive in the Antarctic at the end of summer, the temperature is only as high as just above zero. It goes down to -2 in the winter when the ice forms. But in summer, the water only ever gets as warm as +0.5 degrees centigrade, something like that. So that was a bit of a shock. The coldest I'd dived in before then was, I had dived in some frozen lakes in UK. Well, not frozen lakes, but lakes in the middle of winter. But I'd never dived under ice before. But in the Antarctic, when I got there, the ice hadn't formed yet. So it was basically diving from inflatables. And then the ice begins to form. But there were people on base already who had spent a year there, because at that time the standard contract for being in the Antarctic was 2 years that you spent in the Antarctic. 2.5 years you were away from UK. And some guys had been down there, so they'd seen the winter ice diving operations. And they kept me right about how to do it and things. So anyway, I had a great winter, and it was good, excellent. And that was where I began to get into underwater photography. I really didn't have an underwater camera at that point, but one of the guys on base did, and I borrowed his, and we used to process our own films. Because remember, this is film back in those days. It's not like you go underwater and click and have a look at it. You go underwater with 36 pictures in your camera. You take what you thought were good pictures, come back, go into the dark room, process the film, and then a few hours later it would be hanging up there and you could see just how bad it was. So I took a few okay pictures the first year, but basically when I left after that first session, which was more or less a year after I had arrived, I went through South America on a big long trip just for the hell of it. But by the time I got back to UK in August of 77, I decided I want to go back again. So I reapplied, and this time got the job and went down. Now the job the next time, I went and worked as a commercial diver for a while in Germany just to get some money. And with that money, I bought some decent underwater stills equipment before I got on the ship and went down. Now my next contract was supposed to be for one summer, one winter, and one summer. and then that would be back home again. And that was what I signed up for. It was fine. So I did the summer, I did the winter, I did the summer. But then at the end of the second summer, when myself and 6 others were going to get picked up, which finished our contract, picked up and go home, the sea ice arrived 2 months earlier than anyone expected it to. And again, this is before the days before satellite pictures would let you look down and you could see the ice. If we had satellite pictures, you would have seen the ice coming from the south, and you would have made sure that the ship came a bit earlier. As it was, the ship tried to come in, and it couldn't get within a couple of 100 miles of us. And it was just solid ice that was hitting. There was no helicopters on the ship. Quite late in the season, all the other big icebreakers had gone home. Even they wouldn't have come in to relieve the base. So the long and short of it was that myself and 6 others got stuck for an extra year in the Antarctic. You're laughing, probably because you're thinking, gosh, how do you cope with that? Well, actually, I mean, I was quite happy with it. I was having a great time. We had enough food and emergency supplies to see us through. The guy you had to feel sorry for was someone who had come down really for only 3 months. He was only coming down. He was a summer scientist. He was going to come down for 3 months, and he just got married 2 months before he came down, and he had to explain to his wife how he was stuck for an extra 9 months in the Antarctica and couldn't get home. And Alistair, he adapted himself fine. His wife had a hell of a job. She gave him a stick all the way through the winter, saying, why can't you get yourself out? Why can't they fly a helicopter in? Why can't they do this? And anyway, so but I must admit, by and large, the 6 people who were stranded, and some of them, again, I'd done a year, I got stuck for 1 year. Some people had done 2 years, got stuck for a 3rd year. One guy came from another base who'd done 2 years there. He just came in for a month at the end to service the meteorological instruments we had on base. So he came in, intended to be there only a month, and he was still stuck for the winter. So I was, but the British Antarctic Survey still does choose adaptable, flexible people who they might be very different, but they all get on with each other. When the chips are down, they do, hold themselves together. So it was a good winter. It was a good winter. And I got a chance to do even more photography, and it was good. And the big break at the end...
And that's so...
Well, my big break then came having done 2 years instead of 1. I was the final summer, and halfway through that summer, David Attenborough came on base with a very small film crew for 2 days, just 2 days. And it fell to me, they were on HMS Endurance. We're talking about 1981 now. They came on base with a very small film crew. Just for 2 days, they were filming pieces to camera. There was David saying bits and pieces. They were filming for his 2nd big series called Living Planet. And it fell to me to help them because basically I had not much work to do in that 2 days, and they needed someone to go with them just from the safety point of view and also to get to the best vistas and what. So I helped them. I was with them the whole time. And by the end of those 2 days, I was hopelessly in love with the idea of becoming a wildlife cameraman. I'd never picked up a movie camera. Wow. And David and the others were so generous with their advice and their information, but also they were just such a fun 4 people to work with. I would defy anyone who didn't know anything about the business to work with those 4 for a couple of days and not think, God, what a great bunch of people to work with. And wouldn't it be great to be a member of a team like this? And they were really generous. And also, I remember the producer saying at one point, he said, it's really good to have met you, Doug, because if I want to go to Africa, I've got any number of scientist friends, what have you, I can ask them, where do I go for elephants breeding or fighting or giraffes doing this? No problem. He said, but if I come back to the Antarctic and I want to, then I'll make a beeline for you because you've got the cold sorted out, you can advise us what clothing to take, you die if you work with the animals. You're clearly well equipped to do that. And the implication was sort of, if you want to move on into wildlife filming, then it's good to have a niche. It's good to have some part of the world, some talents that not everyone has. You know, if I had met that crew on a coral reef, it might have been different, because there's any number of folk that can dive on coral reefs, but the circumstances were such that, you know, so I took those things on board, and, well, they didn't say to me, look, come to me with a camera and I'll give you a job. The next time I came back to UK, when I came back to UK, the British Antarctic Survey kind of again came to my unexpected help, because they offered me another job, but this time on a base where there was no diving, not even any biology, but I knew from having visited it that they had access, that base, you could access emperor penguins through the winter. The emperor penguins are the biggest of the penguins, and they're the only species, and they're the true Antarctic species that breeds through the winter. So again, back in, this is 82, 83 now we're talking about, it was really hard to access emperor penguins at any time apart from the summer, you know. But to get the real winter breeding, the huddling together, the laying eggs, the very small chicks, you really had to be there. You had to be there for a whole winter. And here was I going to be there as the base commander on the base, but I could access the penguins. So I just really off the top of my head, I bought a 16mm camera and did a little bit of training with it in UK. And then the producer that I had met with, David, I couldn't do any filming for him because his project was going to be finished while I was in the Antarctic. But he got my offer in the hands of another producer who was just starting out. And that producer was doing a series on birds, and he was very keen to have some emperor penguin footage back. So basically he gave me a list of stuff to take, and I shot it through the winter. But again, bear in mind, you're there for a whole winter, 9 months. You should film, but you've no idea what it's like. You can't process it on base. You just hope. Then it's in focus. Hope the shots are there. Anyway, I brought it back, and there was enough in it that he liked it, and he asked me to do another shoot in the Antarctic. And that was really where the career started. So if I had to summarise how I got there, it was basically following one interest and passion with the central thing about diving, and then bolting things onto it. So in terms of underwater camera work, it's much easier, I think, to take a good diver and teach them how to take a few good photographs, you know, than it actually is to take a very good camera person and teach them how to dive underwater. Because out underwater, it's all about, you know, effortless controlling your buoyancy and all the other things. Because basically, whatever situation you're in, whether you're underwater or hanging off the side of a mountain, you know, on an expedition film, you have to be confident of where you are so that 100% of your attention can go down the lens to get the picture that you want.
Yeah. And so you were lugging the film equipment. You were kind of lugging, because you're not shooting digital, so I'm guessing the equipment was hugely heavy.
No, it was lighter than it was to... Film stock was heavy.
Really?
Yeah, film stock was heavy, but a 16mm camera with a 400 film magazine on the back, 400 feet of film lasted you 10 minutes. And then it would take you used to carry about 3 loaded magazines, and you could change a magazine in 30 seconds. But it did mean that every 10 minutes, you had to stop, quickly change the magazine, and the film that you had processed in there had to go back in its light-proof can and then get carried back. So, first of all, you obviously couldn't take a limitless supply of film with you. And once that film had been exposed, that was it. Whereas with modern video cameras, you can take several flashcards, big drives, and you can shoot hours of material without really thinking about the cost. But in those days, you know, as I say, with no feedback, that was the other thing. You know, you knew that when you shot it, you almost certainly wouldn't see it until you were back in UK, because any foreign place, you just couldn't guarantee getting the film out. And in one of the ways, the thing that probably helped to accelerate the end of film and the coming of video or electronic gathering was that when security at and X-ray machines started to come in at airports, that made film a lot harder to move around the world, because all the authorities, even when you rolled up with it and you explained, I can't open this and show you it. I can put it into a changing bag and you can feel what's in it. And, you know, I didn't have time to do that. And there were one or two really nasty airports that had stuff that would just destroy film. It would just take, if it went through those scanners on the way in, then it wouldn't record anything. If it went through on the way out, whatever you had filmed was just obliterated. So that, when those machines began to get more widespread, that encouraged the move over to tape. But it was, tape and then eventually digital. But it was a long, long time. It's only really in the last 10 years that electronic media and the cameras that you use to record the images, it's only now that they've really surpassed film in certain qualities, And the big one of the issues with electronic media is that, if you shoot a piece of film and look after it, you can go to it in 50 years' time and scan it back to, the resolution that you might need. We don't know if that can be done with. Yeah. We don't know if there's going to be long-term degradation of electronic stuff that's stored on hard drives. Certainly if it's stored on a drive with a whirry disk in it, then you put that somewhere and you might plug it in and suddenly your whirry disk doesn't whir anymore and you've got problems. So,
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the electronic media and the cameras, because they're so much more adaptable, flexible for low light conditions, and you can miniaturize them and all that. There's huge advantages with technology moving forward.
Talk to me about, obviously when you're shooting film, there's two aspects to this. One is wildlife photography. I've done it. You need to be so patient because the perfect shot will come one time every 20 hours, of sitting there, but you actually only have so many opportunities to shoot it with film. So talk to me about the patience aspect.
Well, it's interesting. That's a lot of people ask me that, and I say, well, one thing is remember you're being paid to be patient. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like sitting on a bleak hillside for a whole afternoon and not really seeing anything, then don't do wildlife, do something else. But also there's that understanding when you work with good producers, there's an understanding that not every day is going to be fruitful. In fact, if you go back to a program like Blue Planet, then 1 in 5 shoots, because it was very ambitious, the original Blue Planet, they're all ambitious, but 1 in 5 shoots with Blue Planet came back with nothing. The animals weren't there, they didn't do the behaviour we wanted, or the weather played up, or things like that. And there used to be a rule of thumb, which is very slightly, obviously, when you put a camera person into the field, then you've got a certain running cost per day. If it's a simple camera person, say with a vehicle in Africa and a lodge that he's going back to every night, then you've got the cost of the camera person, his equipment, a driver of the vehicle and the easing. That's fine. But if you're shooting in the open ocean where you need a 30-foot boat with a crew and 2 camera people, one for topside, one for the other, then your daily costs are much higher. The daily costs are much higher. So every film has a budget, and you have to a budget for filming. And the decision is, what are we going to try to shoot for this budget? And to do that, camera producers often work with, they know roughly what their costs are per day, and they work out how many days of filming they'll get. And the rule of thumb used to be that if you put someone like me in the field, out on location, for 9 days, I would come back with a minute to put on the screen. So every 50-minute episode of Blue Planet was allocated about 430 days of filming. Now that could be 230 days with 2 camera people per day, or it could be 430 days for 1 camera person, or it could be... But that was the sort of average that we used to work to. Now, the cost per days now has gone up slightly, and filming is done in a slightly different way. But it's still, there's a huge, patience and tenacity. Tenacity is a better word than patience. I always thought patience is a bit of a, it's a bit of a flat word. Doesn't implies not much activity, whereas tenacity is when you really get your teeth into it. And you need to be patient with tenacity, but you also need to be doing something. You need to be wrestling something to the ground, whether it's an idea or something you're writing, or you're out there and you think, I'm going to do everything I can to get this shot. And if that means getting up 2 hours before dawn, walking, being in shot, and then if, knowing that the animal, the best time to get it is the first hour after sunrise, first hour before sunset, then I'm going to do that. How I fill the middle of the day, that's my problem. But that's what I'm going to do. And so if you get your teeth into it, so yeah, you need to be tenacious, you need to be patient, but at the same time, you need to be understanding that, you can't control the animals, you can't control the weather. So make sure that you and the production team, the researchers, make sure that you do everything possible to get you into the best place at the best time. And then after that, all you need to do really is to remember that you can only be in one place at one time. I mean, there's days when I've been living with a field assistant in a little cabin in the Arctic, and every day we would go out and look for polar bears, because polar bears they're great subjects, but they're quite scattered. They're great wanderers. You'll find a polar bear one day and it may be 20 miles away the next day. And generally, one polar bear in 10 square miles is doing well. And sometimes if it's sleeping, it can be hard to find. It looks like a lump of ice. So anyway, there have been days when I've gone out, hasn't looked too promising, but again, that's the other thing. If you're not there, you'll never get it. You'll never film, much from inside your cabin. So anyway, you get out there, you film, or you get out there, you spend the whole day travelling around, don't see anything, and then you come back to the cabin, and there's just bear prints all around the cabin, and there's little cub prints and all this. You think to yourself, God, if I just stayed here, I'd have got some lovely stuff. But you remember, you can only be in one place at one time. But if you're not there, you'll never get it. And your best bet is not to stay in the cabin and hope a bear comes to you. The best thing is to get out there looking for the bear and then find it, hope it's doing something, but then stick with it. And that can be one of the toughest things in the Arctic, especially when you may have 24-hour daylight. You don't know when to leave a bear. I mean, I've been out for 36, 40 hours solid when things have been happening, grabbing bits of sleep, sleeping on the sledge or things like that, but basically being out ready to film 36, 40 hours when certain things are happening. So, that is all elements of being patient and tenacious. But then, as I say, if you're going to be ambitious, you have to expect a reasonable level of failure. And the producers know that. And that helps you in the field. There's nothing harder than working with a producer, perhaps, who isn't so experienced, and they can get very worked up and worried that my program isn't going to work. What have you used? But sometimes it won't work. Sometimes it won't work. And making a wildlife film is a work in progress until you run out of filming budget. But then it becomes a work in progress until the editing is finished, and then the track laying is finished, and narration is put on it. And at all these stages, if you've got the best people working at every stage, the best researchers to find the stories, the best production coordinators to set things up so that you get in the field in the best position, and then the producer making the right decision. You do a good job. You bring back the spectacular building blocks, and then in the hands of a sensitive editor, and then a good narration where not too many words, sensitive music. You get all those things right, then you get something where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And that's where you get the Blue Planets, and the other special movies from. And it doesn't happen all the time. Even with the best film in the world, it can't necessarily happen.
Yeah. And do you think that's partially, and I say this purely from personal experience, I think part of the reason that I got so, addicted is probably the good word here. Yeah. I got so addicted to the feeling of achievement once I'd captured that dream shot because of the amount of effort that I put into it. I was up at 3 a.m. I climbed that Monroe. I ended up getting that beautiful sunrise shot. Do you think that's partially why you got addicted to wildlife photography?
Well, there's no doubt. There's immense satisfaction out of doing it. I like the fact. I say to people often that, it's great that in places like Scotland, you have to work a bit. You have to work a bit to get the special shots. I mean, you went up that hill and it was great, but you might have got to the top of the hill and it was foggy. You might have to go to the top of that hill 10 times if you really wanted that shot. But I think because those moments are perhaps fleeting, or you have to work for them, that does make them all the more valuable. And so, it's like,
Yeah.
To be honest, the thing when I look back on my career, it's the more you look back on it, the more you look at the chances you've had to done, the biggest sense of privilege that you get. Out of being asked to go to these places and spend time with these animals with the understanding that you're going to do all you can to get this behaviour, but you may not get it, but that's okay as long as we know you've done your best. So when things do come together, it's magic. But on the other hand, when you are filming, the big difference between filming and taking photographs, with a single photograph, you're usually looking to capture the essence of what you want in that single picture. With movies, it's all about getting different shots you can then put together into a cohesive, dramatic story. And very occasionally, the very best single picture or best single 10 seconds of film won't make the final cut because it just doesn't fit in so smoothly with all the other stuff that you've got. Maybe it's backlit, for example. Maybe it was great. It happened on that one day late in the afternoon when the lighting had slid down from where you want it round to backlit. And it's very hard to cut a single backlit shot into everything else where the light is more front lit. So you might get that great shot, but just, this is where you have to trust editors and producers to make the right call. But the good thing, the other thing I like with wildlife filming is it's a real team effort. It really is. Everyone should take credit. And for all the BAFTAs and Emmys that I might have for cinematography, I always remember that what the judges have gone on is the finished product, which has had beautiful editing, sensitive maybe commentary over it, some lovely music or lovely sound effects, what have you. They don't strip it away and just look at the photography. They might think a little bit about the effort that's taken to get there and do it. But what they're looking at and judging the photography on is actually surrounded by all these other talents. So that really to single out cinematography is, well, that's why they have different awards for different things. But I always think that, you've got to remember that you're part of a team. And I enjoy being part of that team. I enjoy supplying. My job as a camera person is to supply as many varied, interesting, creative, technically perfect building blocks into the hands of the editor and producer who can then go different ways with it. They could cut it quick and dramatic. They could cut it longer. They could cut it sensitive emotionally. They could do lots of things with it. Now, quite often when you go out there, the director or the producer will have spoken to you about the kind of thing he wants in the film. For example, some of them, they definitely want characters in the film. If you're making a film about a polar bear or about penguins in general or something, then penguins in particular, they're almost impossible not to put characters into because they are just like little humans walking around. They're not really birds, they're ordinary humans. And so you can't film a penguin without having some anthropomorphic thoughts on it. And with certain kinds of films, you might want to play to those anthropomorphic thoughts, even with little commentary bits or how the music runs or things like that. Or if it's depending on who it's aimed at, you might even, give them names, if it's particularly junior audience. Yeah. So you need to know all that before you go because it can affect how you film things. But at the end of the day, you're filming for the producer, so you want an idea of the style he wants, and then you give them all the building blocks and let them go on with it and accept that, there may be maybe creative differences that you have by the end. The one thing that the biggest probably thing that people disagree about is music. There's hardly anytime
tell me about it.
Anytime you hear music on it, some folk love it, some folk hate it. There was a move quite a while ago, but I don't think we'd ever get it. There was a move that with DVDs in particular, you could launch a DVD which had the full finished movie on it. But you could also do a version, because for virtually the whole of a movie, you put a soundtrack, a natural soundtrack on it. It's just that with a lot of the time, it fades to nothing if you've got lots of music in it, or you take it right down low if the narration's important. But without much problem, you can produce a version of a movie where you took the narration and you took the music off it, and you just gave people the option of watching it with the natural sounds. But I think there were various objections to that, and it never actually took off. But I think it would have been an interesting, offer, so to speak. two different versions of the same DVD. And I think some folk would have liked it.
Absolutely. And I certainly would have liked it. It kind of resonated what you said with me there about the teamwork aspect. I've got a couple of videographers that I travel with when I do videography work.
Really?
And I feel like because you have there's a lack of stimulant. You're not really on your phone. You're not on a laptop. You're sitting there with your friends trying to capture one moment, and you're focused on this moment. You grow such a deep connection with the people that you're filming with because you've got nothing else to do. So you end up chatting about such deep stuff and deep conversations. Do you have like a set team that you prefer to work with because of that relationship?
I was going to say, and then you get so deeply into what you're talking about that you miss the shot. Is that what happens?
Yeah.
Well, you see, you wouldn't last. You want to do that when you're filming. There have been certain, teams, certain programs I've worked on that I've known it's a good team and we've got on well. I mean, the Blue Planet team was really small considering what we were doing. And it was a very happy crew. And then the Polar Bear Special was similar, and some other things. But the sad thing that can come over you, sad realisation at the end of a big shoot, is that when the last of the filming has been finished, when the program's gone out, when you maybe have a wrap party, when everybody gets together, when it's very good, you realise that probably this lot are not going to come together again because the producer goes off to something else that may be not suited for your kind of filming, or the researchers will go off and do other things, or they become assistant producers and they move on to different projects, and then the camera people are all freelance, so we're looking for different things, different talents. So it's quite, I've been lucky. I've worked with one or two producers consistently, and we've got on well because we've both had the same vision for the programmes, and we both appreciate each other's style. They like the kind of stuff that I come back with, and I like what they do with it. But sometimes, the producers tend to move on to bigger, higher things. They become exec producers covering several programmes at the same time, and so they drift out of your orbit. But then, of course, younger producers and camera people come in too, and as producers, as you get older in a way, some of the producers that you worked with, if they were 10 years older anyway, then they'll retire and move out of it. And the younger producers coming through, they've already found the camera people that they like working with. So there's a bit of a flow through all the time. And now I find myself getting together, enjoying getting together with a whole range of camera people, producers who I did a lot of work with, and we get together and sometimes, it's grumpy old men, and sometimes it's looking back with nostalgia about how different things were, then. And things, they move. The whole business has changed massively with big jumps, through history. And having been filming for 40 years, I can pick out where those historical leap forwards or turning points were. I mean, right now there was a big slump in the industry, wildlife-wise, in about the mid-90s, because in about 92, 93, the cable channels, the satellite channels came on stream in America and also to some extent around the world. And there was suddenly an enormous hunger for new content, and wildlife was perceived as a good content to get because it was international. You could show the same pictures, just translate your narration. And you got all this extra material from it, which you could maybe use into other films. So between about 94, 95, 96, there was a huge explosion of wildlife feature all over the planet. And a lot of it was crap. And the market was just saturated. And quite suddenly, the bottom just fell out. Yeah. Nobody wanted wildlife anymore. We squeezed in Blue Planet with its decent funding just before the bottom fell out of it. But while we made Blue Planet, there were hardly any other productions being made around the world. And that was almost the state. But then when Blue Planet came along, it rewrote the rules because, it was a major new series where there hadn't been anything like that for the last 2 or 3 years. It really took on a difficult but adventurous, exciting new world underwater. It had lots of new behaviours in it, and it was marketed incredibly well. And the amount of money it made just changed the landscape. And so big series came back in fashion, and they blossomed and bloomed and all the rest of it. And then there was another big boom when COVID came along, because all the streamers started up. Suddenly there wasn't just Netflix, there was Disney and Apple and, all the other streaming channels came in, and they all wanted to own their own material. So they commissioned a whole lot of wildlife films. So for about 1920, and then COVID boosted it almost, because nobody had anything to do except watch programs. So there was a whole made. And what we're in the position is now is there's been a real dip, because one of the things with with television when I started was that if you missed that program when it went out, you never got the chance to see it again. So you got massive viewing figures. Yeah. But now with the streamers, they commission something and it goes into there and it stays on their platform forever. So the new series that they've made, along with the ones they bought in beforehand, there's a massive amount of wildlife sitting out there that you can pick up any time you want. And so quite suddenly the appetite has gone off wildlife. So whereas probably in 2020 there might be 5 or even 6 major blue chip, what we call pure wildlife series getting made, mostly by companies in Bristol. Now there's just 1 or 2. So, it's boom and bust, and then it goes through. And somebody will come along to produce the next boom. I mean, it may be that we think of a new way of making wildlife films, a new way of conveying a message and things, but I'm not sure where it is yet.
And I suppose on the note of kind of Blue Planet and these documentaries, I remember when I was very young, my dad would get really upset with me watching rubbish on TV, The Simpsons and Futurama. But the one thing that he wouldn't get upset with me watching, and he'd actually come in and sit down with me, was Blue Planet. And I thought just the artistic, looking back in it now as a videographer, photographer, the artistic detail on that program is astounding. Talk to me about David Attenborough and his vision for it and how that aligned with yours.
Well, I mean, there will never be another David, undoubtedly. I mean, David has been involved with filmmaking since 1954, I think, which is an unbelievable amount of time. And there was a period where he wasn't making films, but he was actually, at that point, he was the controller of BBC Two. When BBC Two kicked off, I think he was the controller for BBC Two. He chose a lot of the pictures, a lot of the stories, and he knew that wildlife. When a channel came along with colour, he knew that wildlife would really benefit from that. So he's been a real consistent consistency of style, and that to some extent, he does have his, he has his detractors. Now there are those who feel that he should be making or have been making films with a more point to them. David would argue quite rightly that he has. I mean, when you go back through his back catalogue, 10, 15 years ago, he was making series like State of the Planet and things like that, which were pointing out the issues that were on the horizon. But he's just, at any one time in history, I think you get 2 or 3 people who have that global outreach, who are recognised wherever they go, like Nelson Mandela and David. I can't think of many others. So to have met him the way that I did and to have stayed friendly with him and also worked with him in a professional capacity over all the times, over all the years has been great. And I'll tell you the story that I think sums up David, was that you may remember, but there was a series in 2010 that BBC Scotland did, which was called Wildlife Cameramen at Work, right? And it was a 4-part series. They looked at the sea, ice, land and the sky, and they picked 5 Scottish-based camera people and got them in detail to talk about how they got started, some of their highlights and things like that. So that was a BBC Scotland commissioned programme, and it was very cheap to make. They filmed it in about 3 or 4 days on a very small budget. Yeah. And I remember talking to the producer and saying, so who's going to show this? Now, because it was a BBC Scotland commission, at that point, only BBC Scotland were going to see it. And he said, only BBC Scotland at the moment. He said, but it would be nice to sell it to the other regions. I said, I don't think it's going to sell big internationally because, it's a very sort of Scottish feel to it. He said, but I think we should try to sell it to the whole networks. He said, but it's a matter of getting somebody like David to think if they would do the narration on it. And I remember I said to him, I don't think I said to him, let me see what I can do. I hear what you're thinking. I know what I'm going to do. And so I wrote a letter to David, a wee letter, which basically said, BBC Scotland are making a series about your favourite people, the camera people. And the producer implied that it would be great if you could do it. So I'm writing on behalf of those camera people to ask you, would you do us this great favour? And he wrote a letter back, I still have it, which said, Dear Doug, didn't fash yourself. It'll be my great pleasure to help you out with this narration. And that was what he did. So I bore this letter back to the producer and I said, look, we've got David on board and he's happy to do it. Wow. And the great thing was that when you listen to it, David says, quite often David will have, with series that David starts or is closely involved with, like Life of Mammals, Life of Birds, those long-running series, David will be intimately involved with the programme right from the start, and he'll probably write a lot of his own scripts. But with some things, when they come to him, a script will be written for him. It will hopefully be written in a style where he doesn't have too many changes to make. But there's always a few little turns of phrase which David will correct. And so I suspect for a lot of that, well, I know if you listen to the narration, David says really complimentary, personal things about all the camera people in different times. And there's no way that would have been written into the script. Those must have been David saying, thinking to himself, this is what I want to say about this person. And that's just David. He's so generous with his time. And he's one of these people that can be talking quite literally to the Queen in the morning and he'll stop and answer a question for a 5-year-old in the afternoon. And he's got endless patience. I remember being in an airport once where a lovely old woman came up to him and she said, I know who you are. And he said, do you? She said, you're Richard Attenborough. David was... He didn't actually correct her. He just said, well, I'm David, actually. And she still almost, she didn't believe that. She was so convinced he was Richard Attenborough. She was getting on David next time. David's like that. And I think he finds it difficult now, being probably the age that he is, but he's just so well known that anytime he goes out, he's so approachable that people feel like they can approach him. And I think while he has still lots of patience for it, he has a bit less patience, but maybe less strength than he had to go through it with it. And certainly I think it's common knowledge now that he's finished with the big leaping around all over the world presenting type mode. I think he's happy to do things in UK and obviously do some personal appearances and things, but you've got to remember, I think he's 96 or either 97 this year. So, he needs to pace himself, let's say. But no, he's a wonderful, consistent person, consistent personality and consistent voice through all those years. And it's been a real privilege to have done some stuff with him.
Yeah, and an absolute inspiration to so many people around the globe, including myself. I said at the start of the podcast,
I can't think of anyone else who's so recognisable and so has been associated with so many high-end projects. And it's almost like David's presence brings a quality to a project anyway. But that's usually because, he is such a... He's held in such respect, but also he has such an astute feel for what makes a film work that he takes it in his direction, and that direction seems to be, universal classiness, let's say.
And on the note of what makes a film work, what are the kind of struggles. I know that I was filming in Finland very recently, and it's minus 30, and there's lots of camera issues that arise when you're filming in these conditions. What are the kind of issues and difficulties that you face when filming in the Arctic, underwater and above?
Yeah, in many respects, I'd rather film in the cold than in the jungle. The jungle is much less comfortable. You can dress for the cold much more than you can dress for the heat. And you go in the jungle for a long time when it's wet and moist and there's leeches and there's fungus growing in your lenses and all that sort of crap. And it's a much less healthy environment to be in. You're much more likely to get disease-ridden coming back, spending time in the jungle than you are in the Arctic. The Arctic, you get cold and it can kill you, but if you dress properly, it's okay. Yes, preparing the equipment is obviously something, and there are certain, when it does get cold and you're using lots of electronics, then cables can be an issue. They get very brittle, so you have to be careful with your cables, carry lots of spares, try not to unplug things any more often than you can. The cameras themselves actually are they're pretty much solid state nowadays. There's hardly any working parts in the camera, moving parts in the camera now. So the secret is to take lots of batteries and take up what you'd call a barney, which is sometimes you make them yourself. It's like you make an insulated cover for your camera. You don't need to put heat into the camera. The camera generates a lot itself. So it's a matter of if you keep it warm and by covering it with something that stops the heat escaping from the camera, carry enough batteries that you can keep your camera in standby mode all day, then that's fine, because if the camera does get very cold, and what can happen is that it can do funny things to the sensor, the pixels and things that will produce in funny colours, which can be hard to grade afterwards. So when you can keep the camera warm, fine. You can carry lots of spare batteries. You can a spare battery pack, which you can keep somewhere warm and just take a cable up to your camera. Lenses are a bit more of an issue, because lenses, especially big cinema lenses, have got a lot of glass in them and they're quite heavy, and a lot of the big movie ones, the lighter video lenses can have servos in them, which, electric motors in them. A lot of the cinema ones don't have servo motors in them. So what could happen with them if you take them just as they come out of the box to maybe below minus 10, 15, then all the lubricating oils will start to get really viscous and they'll glue up. And so focus can suddenly, you just can't pull it, or the zoom will lock up, what have you. And in that case, you have to take it to an engineer, strip it down, remove all the old lubricant and replace it with much thinner lubricant, which you then have to, which means it'll carry on working in the cold, but then you have to do the thing in reverse when you come back, because those light oils tend to evaporate at normal temperatures. So you've got to winterize it before you go and then de-winterize it when you come back. And then when you're out there, be aware that don't bring your camera from somewhere very cold into the warm, because it will just get covered in condensation. And then that condensation has to be completely dried out before you go back into cold. Otherwise, the condensation in your camera and in the lens grooves will just freeze up. So you go outside and suddenly your camera's all frozen. So the best thing for that is to, if you want to bring your camera inside, either leave it outside, let it stay cold, or if you want to bring it inside, even when you do bring it inside at the end of the day, I find the best thing is to wrap it in a towel and then keep it in that towel while it slowly warms up, and the towel will absorb the water, any condensation that forms on it. The towel just dries it off as the camera warms up. Or you can put it in a plastic bag when you're in there and seal it as tight as you can, chuck some silicone gel in it, and then bring that inside. It's basically about exposing the camera to as little warm, moist air as you can while it warms up. So wrapping in a towel is just as good, and then, of course, batteries don't last so long. No battery will last that long if it's that cold. And sometimes you can't avoid the cold, but sometimes cold is one of these interesting things. I wrote a book a while ago, a self-published book, and one of the articles in it had 4 cold pictures, and I asked the reader to tell me which one was the coldest. Because the whole point was that you can't tell from a picture how cold it is. You might get a breath coming out of animals, but you can't really tell the difference between minus 40 and minus 25. except one is a lot more comfortable working. And actually, most people are one that looked cold, the blowing stone, stuff like that, was much warmer than the one that was really cold. So sometimes you can just say to yourself, maybe it is just too cold today. So we'll go and look and we'll see. But you also have to be just aware that if it does get very cold, then you can't be as creative as you would be at normal temperatures. Everything's being done with gloves. And sometimes you got to take those gloves off, and after your fingers get cold, you can't hold focus quite so well. If your hands are getting frostbite, so you need to do it with gloves. And then underwater, interestingly, it can often be, if it's minus 35 on the top, it is actually warmer underwater because it's only -2 as underwater. So it's warmer underwater as far as the equipment is concerned. However, if you let all the camera gear get very cold on the surface and then you take it underwater, then, usually it keeps on working. It'll be fine. But the challenge is getting yourself ready to dive, getting everything ready to go underwater when it's very cold on the top and then slipping into the water. The best setup I ever came for dives was definitely in the Antarctic with the Americans in a place called McMurdo, where they do a lot of scientific diving, and they dive all through the winter, but we were there in the early spring. So it was still cold. It was minus 30 odd. But when you want to go diving there, the ice is 3 meters thick, So a diving operation consists of a D9 bulldozer, which goes out towing a thing that is a big drilling rig, which is an industrial-sized drilling rig, and then what looks like a garage at the back of it. And you tow this thing over the ice 15 miles, maybe 21, to do your diving. Put the drill in the right place, and the drill comes up right, and then the guy works it. This drill is a metre and a half bit, and this thing will chew a hole in the ice in a couple of minutes. So you make a hole in the ice with your drill. I'm doing like this, but it's all mechanical. Big mechanical drill drills you a hole, and then you might drop a plumb line down it just to make sure that you're over a shallow reef that you might want to be working on. Once you've got your hole in the ice, then you back your garage over the top of it, because that garage has got a couple of panels in the floor, and you lift the panels, and there your hole is exposed. And inside that garage, which is insulated, big radiator at one end powered by a propane gas cylinder on the other side, you can heat the inside of that garage to 20 degrees centigrade, 25 degrees centigrade. So you got minus 35 outside in the air, you got plus 25 inside the hut, the water at -2. And with that setup, you can prepare your diving, slip in through the hole, dive for an hour underwater, setting things up, so we will come back out, load a new magazine, load a new flash card into the camera, look at what you've shot, take your dry suit off, rewarm properly, have something to eat, do all that for 3 hours, then you're good for another hour, back in the water again. If you do that 3 dives a day, you can do with that setup, and it's really super. On the other hand, I have driven along the floe edge in the Arctic with my Inuit guide sitting on the back of a sledge looking for belugas and narwhals off the ice edge in maybe -20 with 8 knots of wind. Because you don't really know where you're going to find them. And on the back of the cabin, back of the sledge, you've got a wee cabin, basically, which is only maybe 1.5 meters long, enough to sit in, keeps the wind off you. And when you find the narwhals, that's where you get changed with the 20-degree wind swirling around you. And you get off and you hop in the water as quick as you can. Wow. And then when you come back out, you can get changed as quick as you can. But obviously with that, it's the top side temperature that can be limiting. You can't get changed in minus 15, 20, but if it gets down 30, 35, you really, by the time you find the narwhals, your wetsuit, your dry suit rather is, all stiff and you can't get into it properly and blah, blah. So it's really horses for courses, but the setup in McMurdo is great. But nowadays, we dive with, nowadays you can dive with certainly a dry suit, but you get heated dry suits or heated undervests. just like you do for motorbikers, motorcyclists using heated gloves, that sort of thing. And all these things are, the heated dry suits, usually it's a heated undersuit that you've got, which basically has wires running through it. There's a concentration of those wires which heat up when you power them up. And again, you've got a Bluetooth. I think it's Bluetooth. You've got a controller on your arm that you can adjust the temperature of your suit. And then all the heat gets concentrated in the small of your back, which is the best place to heat you up, so that heat gets carried. So you've got all those options which will help you to stay warm, which can be important there's a world of difference in staying warm, whether if you're underwater looking for Weddell seals, swimming around fairly shallow, it's exciting, you're looking for them, you're active and all the rest of it, then you'll stay warm. If you're lying on the bottom at 20 metres, totally motionless, waiting for a sea anemone to open up or some fish to move or something like that, then you're going to get a lot colder, partly because that's when more patience required, let's say, but also you're just physically less active. So again, it's horses for courses. The great thing about the McMurdo setup was that you knew that above you was that little haven of 25 degrees C warmth and a cup of soup and some tea. So when you got cold, you could just head up for there. But at the same time, when I worked in the Antarctica originally, we did a lot of work with a doctor who was interested in what they call afterdrop. And quite often when divers get cold, when they come out, if anyone's in a hypothermic situation where they get hypothermic, sometimes when you put them somewhere warm, the temperature actually drops because of the way their body reacts. Basically the blood vessels dilate on the outside of the skin and it leaves the core and the core just gets colder. So we did a number of experiments where we saw that when we're diving on the Antarctic, in the British Antarctic Survey, afterdrop was quite common. And it's not something you're immediately aware of. And that's why, as a rule of thumb, if you go in on a dive and you get chilled, seriously chilled, whether you're diving in UK waters or in the Antarctic, if you get uncomfortably chilled, then it's going to take you 3 to 4 times as long as you were in the water to get fully warmed again. If we were under the ice for an hour, we'd come up and we might feel okay after half an hour, but you'd give yourself a good 3 hours of relaxing, get some hot drinks in order to properly re-warm, ready for the next hour underwater.
And you mentioned narwhals there. Am I right in saying they're the huge whales with the massive spikes coming off their...
Well, they're whales that have a modified front tooth, and they have an ivory tusk.
Yeah.
It's a tooth, so it's exactly the same as an elephant's tusk. And the males, there are a few females, about 1 in 250 females has a tusk, but most of the tusked ones, when you see a tusked narwhal, it's almost certainly a male. And there's... for a whale which is maybe 6 meters long, maximum 7 meters long, maybe. When it has a 3 meter tusk coming out the front, it's a weird looking thing, and we don't know what the tusk is really. I think it's a secondary sexual characteristic, and it's something that's just basically something that the males wave around like waving willies, and it's just somehow the size of the tusk or something gives them some kind of dominance over other males, and maybe they get more an attraction over a female, and therefore the mating chances is improved. Because when you think about it, if it was really something basic, important, to find food or something like that, the females would have it. So when you get something that only males have, it's all to do with sex and reproduction. So we don't really know, but we think, interesting, that is something that would be, I haven't seen it filmed yet, but it'd be great. Occasionally up in the Arctic, and you would see what we used to call tusking, where you'd be looking out, almost always on a quiet night, you would see it. Because when it gets a little bit rough, the animals don't tend to come to the top because they just get rolled around. But when it's nice and calm and you look at, you would occasionally see this tusk just rising from the top, just waving around a little bit. Maybe another one would come up beside it, and they might cross a little bit and touch. And because you were looking from the ice surface, you just saw this. If you're in a drone flying on the top of that and actually see what's happening, and it might be that it was a group of narwhals, maybe 3 or 4 narwhals, trying to persuade a female to mate then it's just a tusk occasionally coming up,
Yeah.
depending on, might be a group of males just comparing tusk sizes in anticipation of the breeding that's going to take place. I don't know, but that would be really interesting to see that sort of thing. The challenge with male narwhals is that the thing that's great about marine mammals, whether it's porpoises, whales, narwhals, belugas, what have you, is that they are mammals. And the fact is that within any group of mammals, there are as many personality types as there are humans. If you've got a pot of dolphins round about you, there are going to be some that are super show-offy, want to come in. There's some super show-offy in a way that they want to be aggressive to you. Maybe there's mums with their calves that want to just hang that little bit further back. There's the tentative ones. The whole, life's a great pageant is out there waiting to reveal itself to you.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, and there are certain characteristics that are more dominant. Like if you want the most friendly whale, it is probably a humpback whale amongst all the species. Blue whales hardly ever hang around. You'll get a swim by from them. But if you drop in front of them, you'll get them to swim past you if you're nice and quiet. Humpbacks, you go in the water with humpbacks, when they're in the water, they will come and look at you. They want to come with you. The male narwhals just seem to be universally wary. You see them, but they always hang at that distance where you can just see them and they can just see you. They can probably tell a lot more about you because they can ping you with their sonar. They're like all dolphins or many dolphins. Yeah. They can send out high-pitched frequency things. That allows them to pick out fine detail of stuff far away. But you only ever see them at a limit of certainly too far away to film them. And that makes them really difficult to film.
I think that whales and dolphins are just, they're so fascinating, and the way in which they can communicate with it's essentially in their own language, right? Because they use sonar to communicate with each other, especially dolphins. What has been your most incredible encounter with? You said that humpback whales have the most personality.
Well, I mean, I did a long shoot to it in Tonga, where it was half of it was filming for Planet Earth, and then the other half I just said I want to stay on my own expense, and I'll collect footage as I can. So we were out there for about 9 weeks. This was myself and my wife at the time. We were out there for 9 weeks, and we had a long-term hire of a boat. And the boatman was fantastic. His name was Lolly. And Lolly he was a Tongan, and he'd worked with whales a lot with tourists, but he just had a real feel for finding them, first of all, but then manoeuvring the boat round about them. And because there was just two of us, often when you're out with tourists, they all want to get in the water as soon as possible, and they should really just take it easy, calm down, slip into the water easy. But with Lolly and just the two of us, it was dead easy. And we would sometimes spend an hour or more just walking around the whale gently, getting the whale accustomed to us. And we made friends with some fantastic whales at that time. I mean, whales that we could find on separate occasions, because the whales do have their favourite hangout spots. They won't always be there. But when a humpback whale dives and throws its tail up, and you get a look at the underside of its tail, it has a pattern with black and white splodges on its tail. And that black and white pattern is unique to that whale. So if you find a friendly whale and see its tail, then you can go looking for that whale. And we had a friendly whale that was recognisable. It wasn't always in the same place, but we dived with it over several occasions. And on each time, it was always like the relationship deepened and became calmer. And we would let me go up. I had a calf, and the calf got more accustomed. And we got some lovely stuff just in the presence of that whale doing that. And you can't talk to them. But what I like about being in the water with any marine mammal is that virtually any marine mammal, seals, whales, what have you, they've got you sussed as soon as you go in the water, even though you're way out of visibility distance, because as you say, they can ping you with their sonar. They can, they know who you are. They always say that if you want to get a pod of dolphins to be interested in you, then make sure you go with a female diver. because they're much more interested in females than in males. And if you really want to be interested, go in with a female who's pregnant, because they love it. They come in and they know, they seem to know, but they probably do know that in the water with them is a pregnant female mammal. So they'll buzz in, they'll hang around and show more interest in that other person from you. But the minute you go in the water, your body language and your mood get transmitted. When an animal pings you with its sonar, or even any animal, when you go into the water, you're giving off vibrations into the water. The way you swim, the splashing that you make, the noise that you make, but with an animal with sonar and sensitivity like dolphins have, I think they can pick up to some extent, or I'm sure they can pick up your kind of muscular activity, your neural activity. You can tell whether you're calm or whether you're excited. And just like, you wouldn't particularly want to spend company time with a hyperactive individual. You'd much rather spend someone who's a bit laid back. Yeah. You can get if you're too excited in the water, you're knacking your chances. So much better to go out gently, let the animal see you, be content to spend the first bit where it is just in the limit of visibility. Turn away from it sometimes, look away, that sort of thing. And you'll find that animal will come in towards you. Whereas if you swim straight towards it, make eye contact, that's all the wrong signals. So it works on the surface too. People who work with animals on the surface, even from vehicles and things, good drivers will know how long to take to approach an animal, what angle to come at it. And I always tell people when we're out in a boat, a smallish boat or something, or one of the filming boats, and you've got some people who are less experienced, I try to tell them, look, when we see a whale, don't get all excited and run up the front of the boat to get a better view of it. Yeah. Stay calm, walk slowly, and we'll get up to it much better than if you get all excited. Because first of all, getting excited, we'll hear your footsteps on the boat, it'll go through while you'll wake up. So as it is, just nice and gentle. But I also, somehow there's this indefinable something about them tuning into what you're thinking. And it's all about becoming, sometimes in the early stages, and you become an object of unafraid of curiosity. So not a threat, but you're just interesting enough that they want to come in and have a little bit of a closer look. And that might be all you get in 2 hours in the water. But if you can find that same whale the next time, then it'll come in. The female that we had, she was great because she got so accustomed to us and the boat that all we had to do, we would go and look for the same sort of baits. There was one bait that was particularly good for visibility and fairly shallow and things. So we'd always go there. She wasn't always there. But when we got there, we always behaved in the same way. We'd just put the engine into low gear and just putter around, not going in and out of gear, just keep the things steady. And she got so accustomed to us, if she was in the bay, she would swim over and lie underneath the boat. She would lie under the boat as if she was waiting for me to go in the water. And when I slipped into the water, she would come out from the side of the boat. And as I swam towards her, you'd see her nose would come up out of the water. And I would be underwater, and basically they take up that shape or that position in the water because when a whale is swimming horizontally, where its eyes are positioned, and this goes for a beluga and most whales, they can see below them very well. They can see a little bit in front of them, but they can't see above them at all. So a whale, if you're above a whale, and it's underneath you, probably can't see it. So this particular, so what whales do when they want to look at something in front of you, in front of them, whether it's a boat or a person, is they come vertical in the water. And that, bringing themselves vertical, puts their eyes in a position where those eyes are now looking forward. And although that whale would come over and hang underneath the boat, she had this habit of when I slipped into the water, she'd come out a bit, the nose would come up, and I could see her two eyes getting binocular vision on me as I headed across towards her. So it was almost like I recognised the boat, but I want to make sure it's the same guys that are in it who didn't hassle with us. So she looked at me and I had the same wetsuit and stuff on, and then she could relax and go into it. So it was like, this mutual recognition of between species. It was great. Now, you mentioned communication. I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, when you're in the water with the like of belugas, yeah, it's like being in the middle of a flock of birds. They're chirping and whistling and whooping to each other. And obviously, though that contact has a function, some of it, I mean, the ultrasonic stuff, which the sonar type stuff, is so high pitched we can't hear it. But there are other frequencies which they could get echoes from, and you'll get something. But a lot of that noise they're making is clearly social communication of some sort. But what they're saying is open, we don't know. Interestingly, there is a big project taking place with sperm whales in Dominica at the moment, where they're going to be doing a lot of work on the sperm whale population of Dominica. So they've got a good handle on identifying the individuals and who's been born who and who's related to who and that kind of thing. And then they've been fastening what they call D-tags onto them. And these D-tags, you fasten them onto the suction cup. So you get close to the whale when it's on the surface. And with sperm whales, that's okay because they often do deep dives and then spend a long time on the surface. So you mosey up to them with your boat, and on the end of a long pole, you've got the D-tag, small D-tag with a suction cup, and you whack that down onto the seal's back and it sticks on. And it'll stick on for maybe a day and a half. And that D-tag gives you not just the depth that the whale is diving to and how long it spends on the surface, but it gives you, because it's an accelerometer and a compass is built into it, it can tell you what angle and what speed the whale is diving at, what depth it's leveling out at, when it's accelerating, when it's changing direction. So when it comes to the surface and downloads that data, let me see what the music. Right. So when the whale has this D-tag on it, and it goes down, and then the D-tag either floats off, or when the whale next surfaces, it makes a link to the satellite, transfers the data. When the scientist gets the data back, they can make a 3-dimensional plot of what the whale has done underwater. So they can tell where it spent its time. One of the obvious things is it spending its time in mid-water or at the bottom. Acceleration often means a feeding event. It's accelerated towards something it wants to eat in the water. So they've got a big handle on that. And now what they've got a project going is the D-tags will be running, the ID stuff will be going, but they're also gathering all the sounds that they're making with an array of microphones covering tens of square miles. And they're using AI to try to put together what the whales are doing, who's making the sounds, and what the sounds might be changing the behaviour of the whales. So they might pick up something that certain set of clicks and codas, then the whales come together. Or a certain set of clicks meaning they all congregate and start accelerating, right? But the aim or the goal is in 5 to 10, and they need AI to burn that stuff out because it's so complicated and so subtle that what you do is you program AI to say to them, I'm going to give you all these sounds. I want you to pick out patterns. Patterns that are too subtle, too complicated, too random, too randomly occurring, so to speak, that I want you to find them. And they couldn't do it without AI. And the idea is in 5 to 10 years, and I don't know whether it's a good idea, but scientists will be able to make a message of clicks or codas, which will mean something to the whales. Now you say, wow, and you're smiling. That has quite a moral, ethical, side of it. Should we be talking?
Dilemma.
Exactly. Should we be talking? Should we communicate? I mean, we've done a hell of a mess, and we've messed up the world. We really want to somehow, it's like, how would human beings at the moment react were we to get a visitation from another planet? We don't know. That movie Mars Attacks, maybe everybody's fighting for a while and then they piss the Martians off and they're all getting exploded. So we don't know. And I think it's a valid concern. I mean, we don't even know how they, when we talk about communicating by sound, we know what it means. But for the whales, it might be really different. And it's interesting. It's interesting where biology is going and where philosophy is coming in and all sorts of understanding and stuff like that. But anyway, that project is ongoing in Dominica at the moment. And the whole business, of AI and things. I mean, for example, or not AI, but sound under the ocean. There's a great biologist in Bristol called Steve Simpson who's interested in underwater soundscapes. And he carried an experiment. He did an experiment on some dynamited coral reefs in Indonesia, where dynamite fishing had been used. And dynamite fishing virtually takes out all the fish on a reef. And the reef then is in a bad situation because the diet's out. And what Steve did was he took a discrete dynamited reef in Indonesia, and he put down big underwater microphones, not microphones, big underwater speakers down in intervals around this reef, and played back through those speakers, just played back the sounds of a healthy reef. Because when you put microphones on a healthy reef, fish are making all kinds of grunting noises and squeaking noises, and it sounds good.
Yeah.
He played those back across that barren reef, and then got recolonised much more quickly than it had just been left. So it's like you reintroduce things in the ocean, and you encourage the animals to go back there, because the animals can probably hear it on neighbouring reefs, or they're swimming over and they hear it, and it encourages them. They think this must be a good place. They go down there, you know. And humpback whales, which is the one that. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think it's absolutely incredible that we would, if we can identify a pattern of speech amongst these mammals and we can see that they can communicate, it does cause a moral dilemma, but it also gives us the education to try and hopefully communicate with them.
It's massive. But I mean, we're already using, scientists are already using marine mammals, particularly whales, to discover all kinds of things about the oceanography in places that you couldn't get to. You know, people in the Antarctic, in the Antarctic, where certain seals are very easy to catch, they put a harness on them with something that will detect salinity, temperature, what have you. And then they just let those animals get along with their normal diving for 3 or 4 days. And then they find them again, take the harness off, and they've got all that data so they can tell what the salinity, oxygen concentration, all that sort of stuff is at different depths in the ocean, underneath the ice shelves and all that sort of stuff. They just use the animals to collect the data. So there's a lot of potential stuff, can be done with that. And it's fascinating. I mean, nowadays, when a biologist wants to find out what species are in a patch of rainforest or forest, one technique is not to spend hours there looking for the birds. You just go out and blitz the thing with microphones, and you record everything for 20 days, and not terabytes of data, which you then take back, and you've told AI, you've programmed into AI certain bird calls, so you tell it, find those ones, but also find out any other patterns which couldn't be random, and then you might find a bird that you didn't expect to be there, or maybe even a new species that you didn't expect to be there, which AI has picked out. So AI is simply the means of accessing and using much bigger amounts of data than we ever considered, really. That's why Google and Facebook are, recording. If we were on Zoom, then Zoom used to record. When you said to Zoom, we'll record this conversation, then that conversation was also recorded with the video at Zoom's headquarters. And Zoom would take it, and they then had you showing the expression when you were interested or bored or excited or anxious. And they would shove that into their AI in order to perfect their AI models on how to create a digital human that could show anxiety, excitement, and all the rest of it. And at the same time, you've got your voice to tie that in with it. That's what they do all the time. They're collecting this stuff. And who knows? It's terrifying what the Chinese are doing with it. The Chinese discovered that you don't need to see the face to get something. Even more accurate, as accurate as face as somebody's ears, but also how they walk. There was a great story about a Chinese student who came over and did a postgraduate degree at a hospital which specialised in limb recovery and teaching people to walk again. And when he left, they found out that he'd hoovered up a lot of the data that this hospital had about people walking and how to correct, challenges with walking, broken limbs that gone to space. And basically, they reckon that the Chinese guy fixed all this because the Chinese could use that to identify people from their walk. So it's another form of surveillance that they can keep an eye on people. I know, it's anything you can imagine just about is being done. But it is, I've always said that, technology moves forward a broad front, and there's bad things, there's good things, but there's no doubt AI is for a lot of field biology, for a lot of biology, a lot of sciences, AI is reshaping what we can do. Just that data, handling it. But the first thing is to collect the data, which is what Google are doing. Now they've got it. Who knows what we're used for? But they've got it. That's the main thing. And so, that's why
I think it's equally as beneficial as it is absolutely terrifying.
Exactly.
And I think there's a terrifying thing. It's firstly, where are they going to use the data? Also, is AI going to become smarter than us? Is it going to become sentient? And then all of a sudden it thinks, well, actually, people are kind of ruining the planet. So why do we need people? That's a very valid argument because we are, as David Attenborough talks about.
Yeah, I think all those things are feasible. The challenge is, like you say, that if you could guarantee them, AI and all kinds of stuff staying in the right, in good hands, let's say, then it would be different. But you can't. All sorts of things get used now and used for all kinds of purposes. I mean, we're seeing. I wonder about, cyber attacks. There's a lot of concern of where cyber attacks are coming from. And sometimes the main initiator of them could be 2 or 3 degrees separated from whoever actually carries them out. And so it's quite a...
Yeah.
Well, you could get very worried about it, or you could look to the biological things and get very excited by the extra information that is coming out. When you think that, it's not that long ago that we could only really say much about whales at the surface. And then we started attaching tags to them. And now the level of tags that we've got and the capacity for them to bring back information is colossal. I mean, mind you, it's still that we know that somewhere in the depths there are fights between big squid and sperm whales.
Yeah.
We know that from scaling up the size of the sucker scars on around the body of the whale, and then also from dead ones, from getting the beaks inside and scaling up to the side. So somewhere in the depth there are some titanic struggles taking place, and that is one of the holy grails to film, but no one knows how to do it. Particularly when all the action is, you put a camera on the back, but you don't see the mouth, and there's all sorts of issues with it. But people keep trying. There have been some, interesting, deep baited lines going down deep. We've seen some interesting squid come in, but not the big, massive Architeuthis kind, I don't think. Not yet. So there's lots of excitement still waiting.
What I'm going to do... absolutely. What I'm going to do, Doug, I'm going to just restart this because I need to pee really bad. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause this, pause the camera, run to the toilet, and then it'll give you a wee break as well, and then we'll come back if that's all right with you.
Yeah, no problem. You go for
nice conversation, isn't it?
Well, I did tell you that we plenty to talk about.
We need to pause this episode of the podcast really quickly to bring to you a word from our sponsors. Chisholm Hunter are the sponsors of the Into the Mind podcast, and without Chisholm Hunter, we would not be here today. Chisholm Hunter are a luxury watch and diamond retailer. They're official stockists of the likes of Tudor, Omega, Tag Heuer, and many, many more. And they're actually world-renowned for their luxury Chisholm Hunter branded diamond products. So if you're looking for something for yourself or a loved one, head to chisholmhunter.co.uk. That is chisholmhunter.co.uk. And on that note, back to the podcast. Where were we? Massive squid. Yeah, gigantic squid. So do you think there's stuff in the ocean that we haven't discovered yet in terms of ginormous
Well, there are.
things
I mean,
like that?
there's kind of whale called the beach whale, which is it's a small whale, big dolphin, so to speak, but they have, some of them have very unusual teeth. Some of them have teeth that come out of the lower jaw and grow up around the side of the head and almost close over the top. So you wonder how if they open their jaw, etc. But there's been a number of new species of them discovered in the last few years. Because then there's one species that we only know from one specimen that was ever found washed up on a beach. So those are big things that are in the ocean. But when you go down into the ocean depths, down, into the ocean ooze, and let's face it, most of that's the commonest habitat on Earth, is the deep sea. It covers more square miles than anything on land. There's all kinds of stuff growing there in the, in the mud and the ooze. There's probably as much down there as there might be, in certain tropical forests. I mean, we know for a fact that we know a lot of animals, millions of species, but there's all sorts of bugs and things that we haven't yet discovered. And there's probably all sorts of stuff in the deep sea too. And that's one of the interesting things to weigh up, is that with this move towards renewables, which are utterly necessary, there's also a need for several metals, rare earth metals, as they're called, rare minerals, which are not found in very many places on Earth. But there are some parts of the deep sea where those minerals exist. In fact, they can lie on the surface. They have this stuff. These little things are like small potatoes, and they're called manganese nodules. And if you lift the manganese nodule, these are down at several thousand meters, but if you lift the manganese nodule and cut it in half, then it's concentric rings of minerals that have been laid down. And they're very rich in certain very valuable minerals. And there's a move to go down there with remote dredges, effectively, and lift these things off the bottom. But there hasn't been a dredge invented which doesn't leave a big dust plume, mud plume behind it. And there's concern over whether those mud plumes to go down there in this part of the world, which is just undisturbed for thousands of years. There's never been a mud plume down there. You could seriously impact many of the area and many of the animals down there. On the other hand, people say, well, look, we're going to go to renewables. We're going to need more of these minerals, so we're going to have to get them from somewhere. So we're going to despoil the terrestrial part of the planet. We're going to let the kids carry on, mining for cobalt, the DDRC, or we're going to look to the deep ocean to possibly get a lot of those supplies. We won't disturb the whole of the bottom ocean, the whole of the ocean floor by, creating a lot of disturbance in one area. So is that not something that we need to sacrifice? And there are some who say yes, and some who say no. So the deep ocean has got all sorts of, as a source of energy too. The sea is a big, wonderful thing. I think, wave energy still has enormous potential in both inshore and offshore wave energy. And there are people, there are scientists and organisations working on creating these machines, these wave machines, which do work, but it's just a matter of scaling them up to then work, but also then getting the power that they produce, getting that power on shore. That can be a challenge too. So the ocean is ripe for lots of things, but it also has lots of challenges. We're still overfishing in a lot of areas. We've got, obviously, overall climate change is warming the oceans, and that's shifting fish and where they live. And simultaneously with ocean warming, which is not the sort of evil twin, as they call it, of ocean warming, more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere makes the atmosphere warmer, which then warms the oceans. But more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere also means more carbon dioxide to dissolve into the oceans, because the two are in balance. Extra CO2 in the oceans means extra acidification of the oceans, because the CO2 merges with the seawater and makes the sea more acid. And when you make the sea more acid, it means that all the little animals that have calcium carbonate shells, corals, lots of plankton, stuff like that, is going to find it harder to live, because calcium carbonate dissolves in acid. So these animals are having to use that bit more energy just to survive in a more acid ocean. So if we start to, affect the plankton, then that affects what feeds on the plankton, and it cascades up the chain, so to speak. So those are major things we should think about. And also, I didn't realise until recently, but the main sea level is rising consistently. I forget how much. I think it's a couple of millimetres, 3 millimetres every decade, which doesn't sound much. But most of that expansion, most of that sea level rise is simply the water expanding. When you heat water, it expands in volume, right? So most of the expansion of the sea, most of the sea level rise is caused by the sea warming. However, much greater rates of sea level rise will be caused once major ice caps in Greenland and Antarctica, once they start melting, that'll be actually adding a volume of ice to the sea, which will then melt. That ice, which was on land, ends up in the ocean. When it melts, it increases the thing. And the figures are scary. You know, if Greenland were to melt, then you'd be talking about a metre of sea rise, you know, around the world, which would cause major problems for a lot of low-lying things. And sadly, you know, all the Greenland is melting at an increasing rate year on year almost. But we just don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to predict. It could catastrophically begin to melt much faster than it is at the moment. On the other hand, the rate might stay the same. But there's a school of thought and a school of science, actually, results that would lead you to say that, well, certainly, unless we change, and even maybe if we do make big changes in the amount of CO2, that the loss of significant ice from Greenland is almost baked into what we're doing. It's almost inevitable. So the only question becomes, how do you cope with that? How do you even begin to cope with it?
Yeah, I was listening to, I think it might have been Sir David Attenborough, his documentary on the sea, and he was saying if we stopped fishing in 1/3 of the ocean, just 1/3, the life would become so abundant that it would spill over to the other 2/3. So it would, in stopping fishing in that one select section, we would actually sustain ocean growth for an eternity. But it's just people can't do it.
Well, the idea of MPAs, marine protected areas, you know, is growing, and they definitely work. You know, if you just give nature a chance, then those MPAs become super productive, and you know the fish that produce there will spread back out again. But we need to not just protect, we need to create more MPAs. We need to have more oases of breeding to really, you know, for it to be effective. And certainly, you know, the idea of 1/3 of the ocean being an MPA, yeah, that would solve a lot of problems. And I think there's a push for coral reefs, which is called 30-30, where the plan, the hope, is that by 2030, 30% of the world's coral reefs will be no fish zones, no take zones, protected. That, you know, none of that, but it's still, climate change is a big thing. You cannot, it's no use conserving all the areas of forest or ocean if you don't stop the big change. We can't, you know, you can preserve a forest, but if you don't save the atmosphere, it still keeps on warming, then sadly all the conservation in the world won't help that climate. It will get destroyed. It'll you know, that zone of habitation will move somewhere else, so to speak. And we can see that even undisturbed. Pardon me. Even in undisturbed habitats, for a long time we've recognised that, you know, as you go up a mountain, then things get colder. There's a sort of wet zone in the middle, this kind of thing. And if you change the climate at the bottom, then the animals will move up the hill, but they can only move until top of the hill isn't suitable for them, you know, and also the speed. And you can do the same thing horizontally. You make one part of the world warmer, then the animals go to the edge of it and they start creeping. But if that movement is too fast for things like, I mean, animals can perhaps move quicker than plants, but plants take a while to move over. But then also, if they move out of a certain zone, then they might come into much conflict with humans, because they might often be restricted. Animals might be restricted in that zone because humans have decided to protect it, and therefore they built up round about it, or human beings are now living round about that area that was safe for animals. But then if you start changing the environment in that area for animals and they start coming out, then the conflict becomes between humans.
Have you seen a difference between when you were filming stuff like, you know, Blue Planet and Frozen Planet? Have you seen a difference between then and now in terms of the global warming?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you go to the Antarctic, it's obvious. You know, you can. When I was down there in '76, even then, for about the previous 7 or 8 years, in February, which was the time when the island had its minimum snow cover, someone would go out and from 8 points on the island, they would take a photographic panorama to show the ice cover. And every year they did those pictures, and every year they still do. And I have the pictures from 76, and I have the pictures from 2018. And it's just whole ice sheets, and just, all bits of glaciers coming down from the ice cap have disappeared. A glacier which unless it was really low tide, you had to walk over this glacier. You couldn't walk around the front of it because you had a narrow beach. Now that's, 40 metres of beach, 50 metres of beach. The prognosis for the ice cap on Sydney was quite a small island. It was only maybe 3 miles long, a couple of miles wide, roughly triangular. But it had an ice cap in the middle. And the ice cap, they know from drilling through it, they know from soil samples on the bottom, that the ice cap had been there for tens of thousands of years, really, and at some stage had been bigger than it was. The ice cap will probably disappear in the next 30 to 40 years. It'll just melt away because it's getting so much warmer. So, and that's all down to human-induced climate change. So the poles are very, very staring you in the face, the poles in terms of the changes that are happening physically. And then, if you work with polar bears for a while, you realise that what's interesting about polar bear is a polar bear is classed as a marine mammal, just the same way as a whale or a seal. The difference between a whale and a polar bear is the whale lives in the sea and a polar bear lives on top of it. Polar bear's natural habitat is sea ice, not on land, on the sea ice. If there's enough sea ice, polar bears will spend almost their whole life on the sea ice. The females will prefer to come on shore to den without their cubs, but quite a number of them den on the sea ice, as long as there are big, stable ice floes, they can den it. And a male polar bear, if there's enough ice and enough feeding, because although the Arctic Ocean is a big area, the seals are not evenly distributed all around. It's in the hot spots. So, but as long as there's enough ice and seals in those hot spots, a bear would never come ashore. But increasingly, with the sea ice decreasing, melting earlier in the spring, taking longer over to reform in the winter, a lot of bears are being pushed ashore sooner. And so they're not getting the chance to feed as much as they used to. And so for the females, at least, this is important because if they don't get a good proper feed before they go in, if they're pregnant, they get pregnant in April, then they'll carry the developing cubs inside through the summer into the autumn, and then in November they'll come ashore or they'll dig themselves into a snowdrift. In early December they have their cubs. Cubs stay in the den until mid-February, late February, then they come out, they go into the sea, start to feed again. Anyway, if that pregnant female, ideally, she wants a good solid spell of sea ice to form through September into October and November, so she can be on that ice hunting seals. So she's got the big fat reserves for her developing cubs. So she's getting to the den, see through that fasting period. Well, if the sea ice isn't there, because instead of forming in late September, it doesn't form until late October, she loses a month of feeding. She's not so fit. So the number of polar bears that are being born, and there are some long-range studies that have been going since the mid-60s, we know that in Churchill, for example, the shores of Hudson's Bay, which is where it's getting significantly warmer, they're not having as many cubs as they used to. Used to be triplets were not uncommon. The commonest one was twins, but triplets weren't uncommon. Now you hardly see any triplets. And the cubs that are born are lighter than they were. They're not as healthy and well fed when they're born. And those first 4 months out of the den, imagine they're born in the den. And when they're born in the den, a polar bear cub is only about 4 inches long. It's tiny. There's no way it can come out, which is why they're born for the first 2 months of their life. They stay under the snow with their mum being suckled. And in there, it's protected from the wind, and obviously it's localised warm, let's say, cuddling up to their mum, etc. But eventually, when she gets hungry enough and when the cubs are bigger, she knows she has to come out, so she pushes you out of the den. You spend a few days where the cubs get some of their strength up, walking around the slopes and things. Then she'll take them down onto the sea ice, and that's it. She'll go back to the den. At that point, the cubs are still suckling, but Mum has had to get down there because she's hungry. She wants to get feeding seals. So again, the condition of that ice is really crucial. It wants to be good and solid, and it wants to be there ideally until maybe middle of June. Because she needs that, let's say, from end of February, she wants all of March, April, May, June, a lot of June, to feed up on the ice, because in the summer, the ice is going to melt and she's going to have enough food enough reserves to carry her through the summer where the hunting is harder. So again, we come out of the ice, and usually the ice is okay, but if instead of lasting until the middle of June, that sea ice now is breaking up in the middle of May, early May, then it robs her of hunting time and it makes summer longer. So it has to be good hunting. If the hunting isn't good, and those cubs too, they need lots of food, lots of milk from Mum. So those first 4 months of the den first 4 months out of the den of the cub are quite crucial. They're wholly dependent on Mum, and Mum needs that good sea ice, good hunting. So if the ice is degraded in some way whereby it doesn't last so long, or maybe it's not good sea ice for the seals to breed on, and there are less seals to feed on, all this can cap all down. And so we know from these long-term studies of polar bears that there's fewer cubs are being born, fewer cubs are surviving into later, in the first few years. And so, things are, polar bear numbers are dropping slightly, but and it's basically habitat loss. As I say, a polar bear is a marine mammal. The difference between it and a whale is the whale lives in the sea, the polar bear lives on top of it. And when you interfere with the sea ice to degrade it, to cut down its duration, its thickness, to affect its ecology, the ecology of the sea ice, it's like chopping down a forest around orangutans. They just, they can't make a living there anymore. And so polar bears won't become extinct, but at the moment you find them all around the Antarctica, all around the Arctic, not in the same numbers. There are some areas that polar bears are more numbers than others. But generally speaking, I think there's about 25,000 polar bears around the world. But with climate change and with change in the ice conditions, we might find that in 10 years, 15 years, that they are no longer found all around the Arctic, that they're more concentrated in those areas that have good spring ice and where the ice forms at the usual time in the autumn. The rest of the time, there just won't be enough ice around for enough of the year for a polar bear to make a living, and so they'll move elsewhere. So the numbers might drop from 84,000 to 10,000, something like that. These are all projections that, when you have an animal that is dependent on the sea ice and you've studied it enough that you know what is a healthy concentration of bears within a certain environment, if you take away the ice from that, then it's almost inevitable you're going to lose bears. So, what can we do? I don't know, just stand back and keep measuring it and hope that something happens. But the poles are particularly tough areas because they're almost locked into what you call a positive feedback system. If the Arctic Ocean is white, suppose the Arctic Ocean was frozen all year round except for 2 months in the summer, which is how it was maybe 100 years ago, then that white ice bounces the sunlight and bounces the heat off it because it's white. In the summer, there's not the whole Arctic ice melts, but some of it melts and exposes black open water. That black takes up the heat from the sun and warms a little bit. But it doesn't warm enough. As it begins to cool, so the sea cools, and so things go back to normal. But if you have a succession of years where that patch of black water gets bigger and lasts for longer, then more of the Arctic Ocean heats up. If you have snow around and it's there throughout the year, but then a little bit of it melts out. Then it gets enormously hotter the next year, and so it melts. So what I'm saying is a succession of warm winters, or a succession of steadily warming atmosphere, black things, heat-absorbing substances get bigger. And so that means that patch of ocean will be slower to freeze up in the winter because it's got warmer over the summer. If it freezes later in the winter, then it's thinner over the winter, which isn't quite so cold anyway. So it means the ice is thinner the following spring, so it breaks up sooner. So the ice is more exposed black water. So it's all, there's nothing to pull it back. It's like every year it just gets a little bit harder. And there are some years where it will recover to some extent, but not like it was. And one of the challenges, they've now got a new satellite up there, one of the challenges with sea ice is that you can look down and you can measure the area of the sea ice. You can measure it by photographs. You can bounce lasers off the top of it back up to the submarine. But what's been very hard to measure from satellites have been the thickness of the ice. And what they're finding, well, they've now got satellites on there that can measure the thickness of the ice. And that's interesting because a lot of that ice, while it looks as though the area of ice in the summer is decreasing, but, not dramatically, but still, it's still within the bounds. But when you look at the thickness of the ice, an awful lot of that ice is really, really thin. And it's so thin, it just needs one warm summer and suddenly third of what you thought was there and good, so that'll disappear.
Yeah.
Not worrying, that's the thing, changes again. So it has people, worried and
yeah.
We are, don't get me wrong, we aren't doing the right things as far as climate change is concerned in many, many respects. That the challenge with it is the speed at which it's happening. We know the solutions, we know what we should be doing, and we're just not moving fast enough on a broad front. And yes, it would be expensive to do all these conversions, but it wouldn't be that much more expensive than the government found to cope with COVID. 400 billion injected into the green economy would do an awful lot, to shift away from so many fossil fuels, etc.
And on the subject of polar bears, one of my there's two things that I've always wanted to shoot. One is a humpback whale, and the other is a polar bear. And I remember seeing a video of you, and you were talking about how you wanted to swim underneath the polar bear, but then was it a long camera to film the polar bear's feet?
Well, no. What happened was we decided that one of the sequences we wanted for this polar bear special was good shots of polar bear swimming. But I wanted...
Yeah.
There were some shots of polar bear swimming, but they were always they didn't look relaxed or anything like that. So we went up to an area where we hoped we would find polar bears in the water. And I tried to film them from underwater by we'd find a polar bear swimming, and we would go ahead of it with a boat, and I would go into the water, and initially I just stayed floating on the water, bobbing my head on the water, and the boat was 100 yards away, not disturbing the bear, but the bears swim with their heads up, they're looking around, and I think when the bear saw me, we couldn't find the bear to come closer. When the bear saw me, it would just paddle off to the side and give me a white berth. So I then thought, well, maybe if I sink down underwater, eye up the polar bear, sink down, I can maybe catch it as it swims over the top. But again, when you're down on the water, you just couldn't see far enough. You couldn't be quite sure where the bear was going to come from. And sometimes it would just pass me by, I didn't see it. But then on the one occasion where I did see it swimming above me, I went up and began to swim towards it. I realised that the bear, there was no way I was going to keep up with the bear, even with it just paddling slowly. It was just leaving me behind. And so I thought, there's no way I can... The ideal shot somehow would have been to go in front of the polar bear, drop down maybe a metre, and then have this bear swim past close enough to see like close enough to get a long shot as it came up. And once it was beyond me, there's no way I would swim after it. So I didn't really seem feasible. And also all the time that I was down there, 5 or 6 meters down, hoping that the bear would come over my head. You've also got to remember that polar bears catch seals underwater. And some polar bears are they're very good surface swimmers as long as the water's calm. I mean, a polar bear can swim 50 miles with, no problem. But they do something, they're also good divers. They can dive down to 25 meters. They've been observed. Somebody saw them off a cliff, and basically very clear water. And he saw them disappear down. They disappeared down, and they went so deep they disappeared. He couldn't see the whiteness, and they would reappear. And then he went with an underwater, and then went out afterwards and estimated by dropping a bright object on the end of a rope, how deep could you see it? And he said the polar bears had to be going, deeper than 20 meters to disappear like that. So they're good swimmers. So all the time I'm down there at 5 meters thinking, where's my polar bears? I have expecting the furry paw on the shoulder. Where I'd come around the back of me and thought, I'll just go down and investigate that. So it wasn't, I didn't think it was going to be successful. Anyway, so what we decided, we had a very small camera, a remote camera, because we had gone prepared to do some filming from the boat. But the secret was, the difficulty was to actually get close to a polar bear, because usually when you approach a polar bear from the side or from behind with a boat or even sit in front of it, the bear just swims away from it, doesn't like things close. But we sort of persisted and we had a good sensitive boatman, and eventually we perfected a technique where we would get alongside the whale and slowly move, and the polar bear, we'd get alongside and slowly move closer to it. And we tried this on 1 or 2 bears and we were beginning to have a wee bit of success. Not great, but it was showing promise. And then we found this just amazing bear. They let us come really close. And basically I could sit in the bow of the boat. It was an aluminium boat, we had about 15 foot long. I could sit in the bow of the boat with this camera on the end of a pole, and the bear was paddling virtually with her feet. And Martha, the producer, was sitting back of the boat looking at a monitor where she could see what the camera was seeing. And this bear just kept on paddling, and Martha would tell me, left about, right about, okay, hold it, let it go. And we would ease the boat back and the boat goes, and we put together this great sequence of polar bear swimming. And it's great, because the bear is clearly relaxed. And we were literally able to get this camera between its front paws. And it was great, because it does a doggy paddle, it doesn't use its back legs at all. Just not through the wall like that. And it went through a bit of ice. And anyway, it's a really nice little sequence where, David, I think the sequence runs for about 6 minutes from the time we see it on the ice, then jumps into the water, comes out in another piece of ice, goes in, has a swim. And I think David only says things for about 30 seconds. The rest of it is just nice images of a polar bear swimming. And it's still, what I like about it is you can tell that bear's relaxed. It's not, everything is happening in bear time. And I've seen other shots of polar bear underwater, but it's obviously been a bit chased. It's usually from 3/4 hour so, and the bear's obviously paddling harder. And you can tell.
Were you scared at all? Because
were you
scared at all because it's a bear?
Oh yeah, I know. I could have. Well, I think it's the bears, when they're in the water, they can haul themselves out of the ice floes. But the worst they could have done would have been to suddenly stop and maybe grab my leg, because I was literally sitting my feet over the front of the boat, just very relaxed doing this. And the bear's only the length of the pole. I mean, the pole's only a 6-foot pole. I guess it couldn't have. But, by that time you have a feel for the bear. And it was clearly so easygoing that I didn't feel in any danger at all. With that particular thing. Anyway, it was a lovely sequence to get, and it really worked well. But it's still a good one to put up. When I do a presentation, I quite often put it up because it's unusual, but it's got, the music is lovely over the top of it, and it's one that I'm very. It's one of these little ones I'm very proud of. There are certain sequences, or certain sequences you look back on, and you are particularly getting them, either because involved in knowledge of the animal and some experimentation but also just that bit of experience that lets you get what you end up with. Or it maybe sound really new, and that one was really new too. But and it was spectacular for being low key and natural and unknown. And also when people see it, they don't realise that polar bear swims with its hind legs trailing behind it, that sort of thing. So you go all the way from that sequence to maybe something like, I was lucky enough to myself and Doug Anderson were the first camera people to film the killer whales making waves with their tail to wash the seals off the ice floes. That's the other end of satisfying, which is where it's almost like the holy grail. You want a big, sexy, charismatic bit of behaviour, spectacular behaviour being done between two animals. Mammals are the best because we associate with them, and you can build up drama from the hunting technique and then the character of this poor whale seal that doesn't really know what's going to happen to it, and then the ruthless efficiency of the killer whales coming in, and then you get not just the top side of what's happening, but also some of the underwater. And again, all the underwater was shot with a remote camera on the held over the side of a boat. We were prepared to go in the water with the killer whales because killer whales are too intelligent.
You were going to go in the water?
Oh yeah, you could. I mean, you'd be perfectly safe. Really, well, you'd be perfectly safe as long as, because killer whales are very particular about what they eat. We tried going in the water after they finished eating. We kind of have a social period, and we slipped into the water with them. We got a couple of them coming over and looking at us and going away with nothing that was useful. And the main reason that we didn't go in the water during the attack phase was that when they actually start making the waves and when they get the seal in the water and start blowing bubbles at it, it's pretty frenzied in there. And there's lots of bubbles. And, also when they wash the flow can get washed 10 metres really quickly. And basically a person in the water would really struggle to know what was happening, to keep up with the action, and the chances of perhaps being accidentally bitten or swiped or, bitten by the seal that might think you were hazard, or in the flurry of bubbles and all the rest of it, a killer whale swipes you, that sort of thing. And it was just much more simple with the boat. With the Zodiac, we didn't pay any attention to it. So we could move very quickly into position, drop the boat in, and again, drop the camera in. Producer would be looking at the monitor. Okay, last about, keep it rolling. Camera is rolling almost all the time. And you get bits of it. Some days you go out and the underwater visibility would be too poor to do much underwater. So what you see underwater is classic sequence building from several attacks, which we put together. A story that, it wasn't an untrue story, but it was, the elements of it were put together from different hunts that we saw.
I remember seeing that footage. I remember a pal of mine showing me that, and I was mesmerized by the intelligence of the killer whales doing that, but also the way that you guys filmed it was insane. If you were to give me, I've got a question for you. If you were to give me some advice as a kind of more aspiring, I don't do much underwater stuff, but I'm getting more into it. An aspiring underwater photographer or videographer, what would be your advice to give?
For underwater, or even specifically for underwater?
For underwater photography, what would be your advice?
The first thing is to pack in the dives. Get them so that all the things which initially you have to think about, getting your buoyancy right, thinking about, when you want to take a picture of something, very rarely is the sea still. There's always a bit of a swell, which is going to be moving you. Sometimes it's not just moving you that way, but moving you in and out of your subject, and this kind of thing. In fact, and as I said, filming underwater, I remember being asked about this, and I said, okay, imagine that you're camped in the Serengeti, for example, right? And you wake up one morning, and you open the door of your tent, and you can't see further than 20 metres. That's good visibility underwater. Whereas if on land, that's a foggy day. You You'd wait for the fog to clear. And not only that, there's like a low-level earthquake going on all the time. Nothing is standing still. The ground, you're not just putting a tripod down because everything is moving around about you. And all your subjects can fly. Even the biggest elephant can fly. So go out and... Those are challenges you meet every day underwater, you know. Poor visibility.
Yeah.
All your animals with a couple of flicks of the tail can be down deeper than you've found them or out of reach or something like that. You're in there in an environment which is pulling you around, casting you around, and then you want to get a photograph of it. Come on, forget it. So the first thing is to just whack in the diving so that all those things, so that when you finally decide to take pictures, all the buoyancy control, the holding the camera here while you move and think around about it, you know, all that is steady. And then learn the lighting techniques and all the rest of it. It will take time, but at the bottom of it is an extreme familiarity with it because you need to be able to concentrate on whether it's currents or cold or anything. They're secondary to getting that picture, to getting that good picture. The big advantage now is digital. You can click that thing as often as you want underwater and underwater virtually look at what you're getting. And if you think it's overexposed or I want to change the light, you can do it there and then. You cannot, if you have not worked with film, because you worked with electronic video, you cannot imagine what it's like to go down and have 36 pictures that you can take, and then it will be at least, even if you take it to the first available lab, it's going to be 24 hours before you see any of them. And each time you press that trigger will have cost you about 15 pence. You know, now that's how it used to be. So be grateful that you can now go down and improve on every shot you want. And so in terms of improving your own photography, you just have to decide to be better. You've got to look at lots of good stuff and not just look at it and think, oh, that's quite nice. Read up enough about photography so that you can analyse why it's nice. Is it nice because there's a really shallow depth of field? You know, just your subject's in focus and everything else is slightly soft. Or is it exactly the opposite? It's a nice wide angle. Is it because everything is sharp from one side to the other? Is it maybe, you know, with underwater, take a look at the lighting, you know, where is it? Is it evenly lit? You know, often camera people have got, the secret of with a lot of underwater photography is to get your light out to the side, because if you have your light directly in line, then you just get scattered, your flash, you just get scattered back. And I'm assuming 99% of the time there'll be some flash on your camera, not with maybe big whales and stuff like that, but with almost most other stuff. Although nowadays you do get cameras that are, you know, they go white balance, and some of them do it automatically. Sometimes you would take down a piece of white card down to the depth you're going to be working at, put that on the reef, point your camera at it and press the button. It basically said to the camera, make that white. And then it would correct all the other colours. Because when you go down underwater, red disappears very quickly, very blue. Your eyes adapt to it quite well. But if you're down in 10 metres on a coral reef, you're thinking, wow, this is colourful. And then you take a straightforward picture, it comes back and the colours are mostly blue. There's hardly any redness, etc. But nowadays you can get colours when you just press that white balance, and even without the white card, it pings it all back again. But then, as I say, when you get flash, again, when you start putting artificial light in it, then if it's straight on top of the camera, then it just bounces back any particles. So usually the secret is get it up here, which is more natural, but also minimises back cutter. But what you often find with camera people is they'll have two flashes, one on one side, one on the other, but one will be stronger than the other. Because if you just give it one light, then you get very heavy shadows. So you got one up here giving you main light, and the other one just punches a little bit of light into the shadow. So it's still shadowy. Like I'm looking at you, and you're pretty evenly lit on both sides of your face. I look like I'm much more dark on this side, right? Well, if you just had one flash, this is what the picture would look like. But if I had a flash on this side, just a general one, not to light them evenly, because that's boring, but just to light the shadows a little bit. And that's especially important with divers. Quite often, that's why a lot of divers, photographically, used to be that you got your model to wear a sort of see-through silicone mask, one with white, that let the light through into their eyes. Blind masks are great because they cut the side light out in the good photography. That is very hard to get light into your subject's eyes. And that's what brings it alive. You know, if you're filming divers, you want to have them, you know, looking towards you and then put a bit of flash in their eyes and make sure if they're using scuba, have them bubbling out, have them breathing out. Otherwise they look dead. So these are sort of like, and usually you want to always film from in front of your subject, 3/4 of front of your subject. The minute you go behind the midline and you've got more tail than head, usually the photograph is lost. You know, so the best thing is to practice, you know, with little things and enemies and stuff like that. They're great for practicing with your light, you know, light them from the front, light them from the back.
Yeah.
You know, often backlighting on semi-transparent things is really pulls them out nicely. You know? So, but the beauty of it is, say, you can go down, you can spend your whole dive in front of one anemone, just trying different light settings and different things like that. And often too, with your camera these days, you know, it automatically records the metadata, what your aperture's been and all that sort of stuff. It's all on the picture. So it used to be you'd go down and you'd take a certain picture, you make a note of what f-stop that was, and then you go to the next one from f-stop it. I mean, that is the beauty. Now, you know, and filming photography should be a lot more fun because the learning process is so much better. But as I say, you learn from pictures because you look at it and you decide, not just this is a nice picture, but why is it a nice picture? And difference sometimes can be, you know, taking it from here versus taking it from 3 inches lower where you're level with the eye line, for example. You know, so many people, they take pictures of their kids standing as an adult, whereas if they just got down at a kid's level, they'd be 1,000,000 times better. And the other thing, when you come back, having had a productive day of shooting, and you maybe know this as a professional, I tell this to people all the time. I say, you must sit down, preferably on the same day, and you don't have to discard all your pictures, but pick the 2 or 3 best ones. Do not leave 800 unsealed pictures sitting on your camera, because first of all, life's too short to bore your friends with. I think it's here somewhere, you know. I just walk away from people when they need to go. It's go, show me your favourites folder. You know, you don't have to dish the rest, although you'll probably never look at them. But the other thing, environmentally, is think how much energy is being used in these massive server systems to store terabytes of photographic data, which will never be looked at again. It's massive. I think iPhone and the iCloud, they should have a thing where if you don't pick your pictures in 3 months, we delete them. You know, they would save an enormous amount of energy. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of data, the amount of pictures that are taken, which are clearly rubbish. Clearly. You read them. Why pay £8.99 iCloud storage on your phone when you could ditch 99% of your pictures and have it within your 2 gigabytes free? I mean, really?
I know I've got on my I've got a TerraMaster, so it's like a big hard drive with a RAID system, so it means that the footage is safe because I'm doing commercial projects.
Exactly.
And
that's different.
I do exactly what you just described. Like I put everything away, but on the day or the day after, whenever I finish the shoot, I'll look out, sort the best like 5 or 6 images, put them into Lightroom to edit or Photoshop, and then the rest leave them. That's really all you need.
That's right. And if you really love it, get it onto a hard drive. I don't trust the cloud. Or any form of remote storage. And these days, you know, you can get up to 3.0. I mean, how many gigs?
SSD,
But, I don't know, it's an enormous amount of data.
1 terabyte?
Yeah, probably. And, you know, there's no moving parts. You can throw this around the place. And they're so fast. You know, when you give presentations, I used to give the ones with moving hard drives in it. And when you plug them in and leave them for a long time, then you get a piece of movie and it just won't play, you know, it has to buffer for a while. There's none of that with these ones. You can wire it in, and they're so cheap. Well, they're cheaper than the old ones, and everything's better. So storage is definitely improving.
I've had a hard drive. I used to get the big G, not to slam the company, but I used to get the big G drives. And they've got, as you were describing, the kind of discs in them that spin. And I must have had 3 or 4 of them, and then all of a sudden I was filming a project for a brand. It was quite a big brand. The hard drive gone. Everything was gone, and nobody could recover it because the disk inside of it had just deteriorated. So I had to. My kind of advice there is go SSD because there's no spinny discs. Is that what you use?
Exactly. Yeah. I think these are SSDs. They were no moving parts in them. We use these. We've got a camera called the Red, which is one of the most sophisticated movie camera you can get. It shoots 12K, never mind 4K, it'll shoot 12K, and it'll do slow motion and all this sort of stuff. And it even at normal speeds, with normal frame speeds, 25 times a second, every one of those 25 pictures is 25 megabyte uncompressed raw file. So it sucks away 25 of them every second from the sensor. A lot of fashion photographers use them. They just put them on movie, and then, because it means you set up a fast enough shutter speed, every single frame is grabbable as a frame grab. But they use 512 gigabyte cards, which are super fast. It costs 800 quid each, but they're incredibly fast.
Yeah.
So really,
I was filming in Monaco quite recently. They were using Red cameras, and the amount of data that it took up. Do you film on Red all the time, or do you have like a digital Canon or?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of thinking about selling my Red, partly because I don't use it so much for movie photographs. But on the other hand, it's really handy because you can use it as a still. In fact, it was designed, as the first genuinely camera that was 2 systems. But I do carry a Canon as well, because the Red has its place. But sometimes, you just want to use a smaller thing. But I don't mind. My Canon isn't the very latest. I mean, I'm still using, the Canon. Well, there are a number of Canon, SLRs and other cameras which do pretty good movie nowadays. But it all depends how much time you think you've got for it, etc. And there's such a lot of material floating around. I mean, I think you're making a living as a commercial photographer. Presumably, a lot of your stuff is commissioned, and therefore they're paying you to take it. So if you can hold on to the rights in some of those images, that's fine. But I think people who just take pictures at their own expense or not commission stuff and then try and sell them, it's such a crowded market now. Because basically anyone with a camera and a Facebook site, the biggest problem professional underwater camera people have, and all camera photographers have, is not fellow professionals. It's your wealthy lawyer and dentist who takes 4 diving holidays a year to the best dive spots and takes along his fancy camera and then puts them all on his Facebook page and gives them away for nothing to anybody who wants to use them. That happens.
Yeah.
Because the agencies know that that stuff's out there, and to offer somebody 50 quid for a film cover, fine, go for it. So, for stores.
Yeah, and that's the reason though that you need to have a kind of niche. You found your niche in specifically the Arctic and diving in the Arctic. I found my niche through kind of travel videography within Scotland, and I took products up to the Highlands in Scotland and all this kind of stuff. But if you don't have kind of like a specific niche that you're in, your net's too wide and you don't actually catch anything.
Exactly.
Because you haven't narrowed it down.
You tend to find the broad people are older.
Yeah.
Because they got into it a different way. They got their name and they can afford to branch out or to stay wide perhaps. But you're right. In today's day and age, it helps to be specialised because you do end up getting better stuff. And you learn where the places to go are and when to go and you just keep refining it. But, I've been lucky that as I say, I wrote this book about 12 years ago now, and it was very successful selling it. And I also got into doing more presentations, things like that. And I got an agent, or the agent approached me, I knew her. And, I've had a very successful dual career as public speaking across a wide range of things. And some of them are, nowadays, some of them are quite well paid, single talks. But I've also got the flexibility. I do a lot of primary schools and all that sort of stuff. And a wee bit of, go along as a sort of photographic guide or photographic advisor, to tourists on potentially small ships. I'm going up to the Arctic in July on a trip to just do that. That's easy because, but again, that works, and they want to come to me because I've got the stories from the filming exploits and the films to talk about as well. So, and the poles are definitely, they're a good, glamorous place to work. They're still, people are fascinated by them.
Yeah. Have you got kind of like a bucket shot that you've either taken or what you still want to take? Have you got like that pinnacle piece of your photography collection, or do you still want to take it?
No, I've been talking for a while, and it's still there. I don't know if I'll do it because the politics of the Arctic are difficult. But I'd really love to get the chance to be in the water with a friendly male narwhal. Male narwhals as a group are really wary, but like any mammal, there will be a range of wariness. And you might be somewhere out there a friendlier male narwhal, but there are also about 1 in 250 females as a tusk. And your chance of getting closer to that female narwhal is better because they don't seem to be, they're not the same temperament. They come much closer to you. Getting pictures of a female narwhal isn't that difficult. But who wants a mottled dolphin without a tusk? Who wants a tusk ones? So it'd be really nice to go up there. It's a really narrow window that you have to film them. You basically have to go up in late May to certain parts of the Arctic, just when the ice begins to break up. But it breaks up across the mouth of some big bays. So in the bay, it's inlet. It's still good enough ice to travel on and live on. But the edge of the mouth of the bay is about to break. And beyond that, it's open water. And the mammals are returning back from sort of migrating. And they sometimes swim along the edge of that ice. And that's when you can slip in and get them. And it's only about 2 or 3 weeks. As the ice breaks up, it's nice and clear. Within 2 or 3 weeks, it's like pea soup because the plankton bloom gets going. Yeah. So it's a really narrow window.
Yes. But that's probably why you want it so much.
Well, it's because narwhals are great creatures. I loved the Ice Age. I spent a lot of summers up there on the Ice Age making films for different people. But it was like a little niche time when the Arctic opened up, and before there were too many film crews going up there, when the ice was more reliable, to be honest, more predictable. Nowadays, the ice can break up earlier and faster and all the rest of it. But it was just a good bunch of people who were up there. There was some really good Inuit, and there were, some good Southerners who'd gone up there and integrated work with the Inuit and things. So it's a good community that I worked with. That community has now, moved and aged, and people have disappeared and things like that. And there's all more politics now about, you need permits to dive, to swim in the narwhals and all that sort of stuff up there. And there's lots and lots of people try and do it every year. And so a bit of some of the attraction in that sense has gone out. And also, if the Ice Age is busy, there's too many film crews, the narwhals don't like it and they leave. So when I started, there was the only people on the Ice Age. And so narwhals were much less disturbed. If you're somewhere in a good place on the Ice Age, but there's 2 or 3 camera crews that way and other Inuit this way, because they also hunt the narwhal at the same time. If you're too many people, then you don't stand a chance. Because protecting narwhals, they may not even get to you. They may be spooked off the Ice Age further out, or they may go somewhere which is inaccessible to anybody because it's quieter there, and just hang around and spend more time there. So I don't know if I'll. Yeah. It would be nice to do that, but it would have to be a small private expedition. So just go up myself and use some of my old contacts and go lightweight to the Ice Age and see how we go on.
You bring me with you.
I'll tell you what, you find the money and I'll take it. You find the bike.
I could try. And what about photos that you've got already? Is there any photos that you've got already that you're really particularly proud of?
Well, what I'll do is I'll send you a copy of my book, which you may not have seen. It's called Freeze Frame.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute, and I'll just nothing still. I'm going to pee and then I'll bring a copy. I'll bring a copy back. Hold on. About 2010, well, for a while I'd been thinking about it, but in 2010 I decided I wanted to do a book of my pictures. I had all this selection of pictures, which were, a lot of polar stuff, mostly polar stuff. And I've been doing a number of talks, and I thought, it'd be nice to have a book which had the best of my pictures. And I tried for a wee while to write what you call a proper autobiography, but I got really bogged down in it. I found it was boring to write it. And also, I couldn't imagine a book with as many words as would be in a proper autobiography that would do justice to the pictures. But I also read a lot of picture books, so to speak, coffee table type books with photographs in them. And to a large extent, the captions or the writing was it was terrible. It was boring and it just didn't do anything. But at the same time, I knew I could write short stories. And I also knew from the talking that I was doing the sort of questions that people are asking you. And when you ask a question, the best answer you can get is to turn the answer into a wee story. So anyway, I sort of bolt upright one night and I thought, I could make a pink selection of the best pictures I've got and then write little stories round about them. And those stories could be as short as a couple of hundred words. They could be as long as maybe 1,000, 1,500 words. And they could start when I wanted, stop when I wanted. And that way I can, and literally within an hour, I had 50 one-liners that I thought I could write about. And so I went to an editor I knew, Ros Kidman-Cox, who's the editor of BBC Wildlife. I'd written a few things for BBC Wildlife magazine. And I know Ros liked my style on the short story front. And I also knew a very good book designer called Simon. So I just wrote to those two and I said, could you help me to produce a book? But I also realised a little bit as the book took shape in my head, I thought I'd approached a few publishers and I knew that I didn't think, I didn't like the idea of taking an advance from a publisher and then them having the say over how it looks. By the time I imagined in my head and knew what Simon could produce, I thought, I want to make this myself, so I've got all the rights to it. And I knew with the talks that I had lined up, there would be a good thing to sell at talks. So anyway, this is what I produced. So I produced this this book, which is basically collections of my pictures, with stories with them. And sometimes the story is about the picture, sometimes about the technique and all that kind of stuff. So over the next, basically between the first one rolled off the shelf or rolled off the printer in 2012, and in the next 10, 11 years, I sold 13,500 copies myself.
Wow, that's humongous.
I know, it's good. And I'd produced 3,000 the first time. Basically, I invested £30,000 of my company money to produce 3,000 copies. So the first run cost about £10 a copy. And I sold them at 25. And I had to sell them individually, really. Well, there were two advantages. If you take a book that you've printed into a bookshop, they want 50% discount on the selling price, and they only want two at a time. They want one on the shelf and want to sell. Yeah. They do, unless it's a guaranteed million seller, they don't want more than two. And they expect you to supply those two for nothing. So to make it yourself, and each book costs £10 and you sell it for 25, there's no money in it. But that was fine, because I didn't want to go and give a talk and find that people were coming up to me to sign my copy, and I bought it in Waterstones before I came here. I wanted something that they'd never seen before to take to talk. So I did 3,000 for the first print run, which Ros, the editor, said, that's pretty optimistic. Anyway, they went, and then I produced about 1,500 at a time and sold them. So I eventually, I did a print run just before COVID, and I ended up, obviously sold none through COVID because all the presentations dried up. And then I sold the last 15, sold the last of them, last except 4 or 5. And I weighed up heavily whether I should print more. But the fact is, by that time, the cost was about £7.50 a book. So you had a pretty good margin when you sold it. But by the time I came to think about the final, another print run, it had gone up to nearly £11 a book. And 1,500 was the minimum print run. You could print less, but the cost kept going up, per unit. And 1,500 was a wee bit, was pretty, if you want to sell 1,500 books, you'd have to do 50, 60 presentations a year, which was kind of more than I felt like doing. But also I was getting people coming to me saying, loved your book, I bought it the last time I saw you. Because I felt maybe I was saturated. Yeah. So anyway, I decided not to publish anymore. But I'm very happy. What I've been doing, I've been buying second-hand copies through Allan, because not to sell, but when I do a talk for a school, I really like to give them a copy of a book. And they're quite happy with signed on. Yeah. Most of the ones that come back to me, I've signed them off to somebody because they've all passed through my hands at some point. Yeah. I did sell some through bookshops. I did sell some to people called gardeners. They're a big book distribution company. They might buy 35 at a time, and then they would sell them 5 at a time to so-and-so. But very few of them ever got into the market that hadn't been signed by me. So this one here is signed by somebody else. Anyway, I'll send you a copy of it because you asked me, well, it's not much good for a podcast. But in this, really, it's got a selection of stories of special memories for me. Things that bear me in mind. So the one that I think I've had to pick a single picture, then it would be one of belugas, which is a really simple picture. You've got a group of 5 belugas, and 5 belugas looking straight at us. It's a vertical picture, and the belugas are maybe 5 meters away. And they're just pure white against black water. And they're all more or less facing me, looking at me. And it won the underwater category in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition a good few years ago. But it's special because, you know yourself. You can remember every picture you ever took. You know how many thousands. You can always remember where you were when you took them. And that one was when I was up on the edge, Canadian ice edge. And the thing with beluga, you would stand on the ice edge and you could see the belugas blowing in the distance, and you just slip into the water quietly, and you didn't put a bottle on, just snorkel, just drift off the edge of the ice edge, and you could hear them. Belugas are really noisy underwater, chattering away to each other, so you'd hear them a long way before you saw them. But to get them to come close to you, the secret was they were very acoustically active. So the thing to do is to become an acoustic subject of curiosity. So you go out and you start humming down your snorkel, start humming a song or something, make something that's audible to them. And they would come in and look at you. And quite often they would come in, and the first you would see of them would be them underneath you. You're lying on the surface and you'd see them underneath. And remember how I said that whales can't see what's above them? So if they're underneath you, but they want to look up at you, they roll on their backs. So this picture is me lying at the surface, looking into the black water. It's a cloudy day, so there's no sunbeams going down. It's jet black water, but really clear. And these white belugas are underneath me. And they've come up behind me on the surface, and then they dive down. And when they're down underneath me, they roll on their backs so they can look up at me. And then they carry on up, heading towards the surface in front of me. And as they go to this top, they roll back on the top so that the blowhole is in the right place when they hit the surface. But the other thing with belugas is that belugas, I think, are the only whales which can move their necks. All other whales have got fused vertebrae in their necks. So most whales, if they pass something and they want to look back at it, they have to turn their whole body to turn. But belugas don't. Belugas can swim past you and look over their flipper, over their shoulder flipper, back at you in the distance. And I always remember, you can see one beluga, there's slight wrinkles in his neck, but it's just basically bending his neck to be able to see me better. But as they went past and looked up, I remember 2 of these belugas twisting their neck to look at me. So that's a picture that has all sorts of memories in it for me. The way it was taken, the day it was taken was exceptional clear visibility. I was the only person on the ice edge. And this bunch just came around and they gave me a couple of swim bys, but the first one was the best. It was shot on film. It was shot a long time ago, this thing. So really, and it's also got them in a nice position. And when you're shooting without a motor drive and you got one chance to click the trigger, so I got it just the right time and the exposure's perfect, no rest of it. So it's a kind of special picture. It sums up the Arctic and these white ghosts that live up there. So I'd pick that one. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the art of photography, isn't it? It's like you look at a photo and you're reminded of the day or the months that you spent trying to get that photo with the people that you were surrounded with, who you loved to pieces because you were a team. And that is what people, I think, from the outside looking in at photographers don't understand, that there's so much more to the photo than just the image that they see. There's the hundreds of hours of work that have gone into getting that picture, right?
Well, there's also the engagement with the environment. That's why when people say, even when you explain that you sit on a hillside sometimes and see nothing, don't you get bored with that? And you explain, well, you don't get bored. You don't get bored because all the time that you spend in that environment, you're just soaking up little cues and little sensitivity to the light and what's going on round about you. And eventually when you press the trigger, you get this immense, lovely mix of satisfaction, privilege, and the fact that you have got something that few other people have got. Even the people who are with you will have chosen a slightly different lens or a wee bit of a different composition, won't quite have got you. And so every picture becomes, or every special picture is special for many different reasons. And as I say, what I've always felt about the polar regions is the immense sense of privilege of being able to go there at a time when they were less visited and in a way very, very special, very, very special. But also, I was confident, when I met David in 1981 with his small film crew, I had already spent 3 winters in the Antarctic with 12 other men for 9 months. There was 16 one year and there was 12 the other years. And so I knew all about the dynamics of small groups and how good it could be. And so meeting David with his producer, sound man, cameraman, and David, and seeing how they got on, it was just a natural, it was just so obvious that I was going to enjoy working in those small groups. It probably didn't occur to me at the time, but it definitely did impress me later on. I do like working in small, with small people. I'm very happy. I'm also happy on my own to spend time with as few people as possible. Certainly, it's going to sound selfish, but in the water with marine mammals, it's actually better to be on your own, or in the company of an animal that can see you, because you know that it's how you behave that's going to have a great amount to bear on what you get from that animal. And basically 2 people in the water, unless you're both tuned into each other and know that you can trust the other, there's always that feeling of, there are 2 people, twice the disturbance, so therefore maybe this other guy's not quite giving off the vibes that I am. So I'd really rather be in this scenario on my own. But on the other hand, there is nothing like sharing an experience with someone. It is special when you're doing something with other people. I guess that's the basis of relationships in life, is because you're looking for, to share those experiences with someone.
Yeah, and experiences are nothing unless they're shared, because you need to share them with someone in order to feel the happiness. To feel that way, don't you?
I agree with that. It's definitely worth it, and that's partly why I like talking to the public. I like to feel as though you're talking to everyone individually, and you make time for them before. That was why. It was deciding to buy the book added enormously to the not the complications, but what some people would think hard work selling it. Well, first of all, you had to take them to the venue, which is, so you had to drive everywhere. Yeah. You couldn't fly or get on a train if you've got 50 copies of freeze frames to take with you. And then you had to get them into the venue ahead of time. You had to be prepared to to be there from the normal schedule for a theatre was turn up 2 hours beforehand to do a tech check. With luck, that is straightforward. It takes maybe 20 minutes to get the sound right, to get the lighting on you, to double check that you've got the picture you want on the screen. So then that leaves maybe 40 minutes of that hour to chill out. But then an hour beforehand, you want to get set up in the foyer and start selling books. And you have to be there because almost everyone wants the book to be signed. So you buy it. If you want to keep your margins up, then you sell it on your own, because the minute the theatre staff offer to help, then they want 20% of the book sales. So you determine to sell them yourself. So you've got that. Then you've got the interval, because it was usually a 2-hour show. You've got the interval where you're straight out and flogging them again. And then at the end, anyone that still hasn't got one, you're around there chatting away. So a 2-hour show that lasted 7:30 to 9:30 was basically me there from 5:30 until 10:30 at night, And that's maybe having driven a couple hundred miles from the venue the previous night. So it was, they were very successful financially and in terms of selling the book numbers, but you could think of them as being hard work, but I enjoyed interacting with the public and doing all that sort of stuff. But like I say, I'll send you a copy. We'll send you a copy of...
Yeah.
I
would love that. Honestly, I'm super excited to see that. And Doug, I just want to say a huge inspiration. Honestly, I'm kind of a young photographer on my trying to get better and better, and I've been kind of looking at your work as I was doing my research, and the kind of patience and attention to detail you have is really special. So a real inspiration. I just want to say that I've truly made it.
Well, I've enjoyed shooting, but definitely, filming is a joint effort. It's a team effort, and that to me is one of the best things about it. Really, I'm at heart a team player. I don't need to be the boss. I just feel like I'm contributing my part to it. Yeah,
no, I really appreciate that, Doug. Well, listen. Where can people find you? Firstly, I know that you have a couple of presentations up and coming. Am I right in saying that?
The next public presentation that I'm doing, I think, is in September at the Minack Theatre in Cornwall. Minack, and the simplest way, if you just Google Minack Theatre, then I'm pretty much the first thing that comes up on the stage. But that is going to be a 1-hour presentation about marine mammals. Interestingly, for a photographer, they don't have any means of showing any pictures at the Minack. So you'll be faced with me prancing around. But I am preparing a few, what I hope will be pretty impressive soundscapes, because I want to be able to take people through the medium of sound underneath the ice and listen to the Weddell seals and the other seals under there. And we'll have humpbacks, things like that. So that's the next major. I don't have a theatre tour planned this year. Maybe next year, I'm not sure. But that's the main next public presentation. There will be other ones coming through. So you can either go on my website, dougallan.com, or onto my agent, who's called Joe Sarsby Management. They will publish anything available up on their website, any appearances that I'm making. But the Minack, which is about as far away from Scotland as you can get, that's right down to the tip of That's the one to make for the 1st of September.
Good. Well, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and everything, and I'm excited to see this book.
That's fine. Well, as I say, it might give you, it's a great way to put out a collection of your pictures. Just think of a story to go with them, and then it can be about the situation or something funny that happened to them. The one classic in my book, I think, is that I wanted to talk about seals. There are something like 11 seals which are unique to the Arctic and the Antarctic, but none of them are found in both. But there's something like 6 seals in the Arctic and 5-6 seals in the Antarctic, which you don't find anywhere else. But luckily, I had encountered them all in various filming trips. So I wrote about them from the point of view of their personalities, because they've all got different personalities. So the seal that's most likely to bite you isn't the big old hairy-looking leopard seal everybody thinks. No, that seal that you see in the circus bouncing a ball on its nose, that's the one that's going to give you the nip far more often. because fur seals in the Antarctic are really sociable, and they get together in these big groups and they whiz around each other, nipping at our fins and things like that. And when you go across to them, the biggest compliment any animal can pay to you is to say, okay, come and join our group. We'll treat you like one of ours.
Yeah.
You do that with a bunch of fur seals, and when they start nipping you on the head and the elbow and all this, and you just holes in your dry suit, nips at you. You really, whereas a leopard seal might look like big jaws and everything, but they can give you a fright, and it could be dangerous if they took you totally unawares. But they're like killer whales; they're too intelligent to just bite out at anything. So there you go. Anyway, that's seals have personalities too. You can read all about that in the book.
Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.